I do the work, and you give the money.
Why do I feel like that dono noise is quiet?
I do the work, and you give the money. I do the work, and you give the money.
All right. How are we doing? Honey, don't even fucking start. Don't even start. What do you want? Why are your ears all pinned back? Hey. Are you being angsty? Why? I don't care. Where'd my coat go? Oh. Jesus.
It's time for the song.
Jesus. Okay, Elden Ring. We get it. He rolls, he dodges, he kills the thing.
Ukraine is losing.
June 29th, 2024. Vaush versus Dave Smith. We'll do alphabetical order. The Ukraine-Russia war.
This war. They're not going to drive Russia out of Crimea. They're not going to drive Russia out of many of the territories that they've taken right now. We should be working toward a deal, a peaceful solution, which has been on the table several times throughout this war, and it's been the West who has been trying to squash it.
Ukraine hasn't been losing. Both countries have been stalling. I don't want this conflict to end in a way that's going to guarantee the conflict reemerges in 2 years. If the line just freezes where it is right now, are we not guaranteeing another conflict in a few years?
The United States of America holds all of the chips. We could offer Vladimir Putin something that would probably get him to do whatever we wanted him to do. And you know what that is, the ultimate crowning jewel for him. How about we leave NATO?
All right, welcome to Counterpoints. Today, we're going to be talking about the Ukraine-Russia war. Emily, who are we going to have?
Yeah, well, we have two great guests joining us. We're joined by YouTuber, live streamer Vaush, and we are joined by comedian, podcast host Dave Smith. Vaush, Dave, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Well, Ukraine is a timely subject to debate right now. Obviously, we're 2+ years into the war, but there have been recent escalations, and that makes it important, I think, to sort of go through some of those recent developments. For example, the U.S. recently greenlit, as many people know, strikes with U.S. weapons inside of Russia. There was the strike that Russia is blaming the U.S. for in Crimea just over the last couple of days. So I think probably a good way to begin is to give you both kind of an opening statement here. And I'll start with you, Vaush. Should the U.S. continue funding this war? And then we'll go to Dave on the same question. But go ahead first, Vaush.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the idea on a systemic level of rewarding Russia for invading a neighbor. I just think, generally speaking, that's bad for global relations, very destabilizing. I think it's important that we support any system that prevents that from happening, and not exactly a novel position. With regards to the recent development and strikes inside Russian territory, I actually think that this is, in the long run, going to be a good move for peace, just because the previous U.S. doctrine, which seemed to be provide just enough weapons to stall the war, but not like decisively concluded. I think that was actually like the worst possible decision. You know, if Russia did an sort of like early conquest, or if Ukraine decisively held its territory, those both end the war relatively quickly. But just interminably stalling it right at the river, you know, I don't think that would have been good in the long run. Hopefully these increased attacks inside Russian territory, mostly, of course, the refineries that they're using to sort of gin up their war economy. Hopefully that serves as an effective long-term deterrent. I don't want this conflict to continue. I don't want civilians to die. Yeah, I mean, obviously we'll have to see how things play out.
Dave.
So opening statements. Vaush thinks we should either fully fund Ukraine or not at all. Seems to be in favor of defending Ukraine because they are an ally. Was that the gist of it? What was the early part of this? Hold on.
And I'll start with you, Vaush. Should the U.S. continue funding this war? And then we'll go to Dave on the same question. But go ahead first, Vaush.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the idea on a systemic level of rewarding Russia for invading a neighbor. I just think, generally speaking, that's bad for global relations, very destabilizing. I think it's important that we support any system that prevents that from happening. And not
because allowing Russia to invade a neighbor would be destabilizing. Destabilizing. Okay. I think that's defensible. Wait, 11-second break.
Israeli things that would send Americans into a coma. Number one, entire bowls of hummus as a meal, as lunch. Can we say indigestion? And then how do you do top Israeli things that would send bowls of hummus as
Okay.
Exactly a novel position. With regards to the recent development and strikes inside Russian territory, I actually think that this is, in the long run, going to be a good move for peace, just because the previous U.S. doctrine, which seemed to be provide just enough weapons to stall the war, but not like decisively conclude it, I think that was actually like the worst possible position. You know, if Russia did sort of like early conquest, or if Ukraine decisively held territory, those both end the war relatively quickly. But just interminably stalling it right at the river, you know, I don't think that would have been good in the long run. Hopefully, these increased attacks inside Russian territory, mostly, of course, the refineries that they're using to sort of gin up their war economy. Hopefully, that serves as an effective long-term deterrent. I don't want this conflict to continue. I don't want civilians to die.
Guess Dave's positions. Okay, hold on, wait. When we watch reviews from now on,
I mean,
since we reviews, when we watch debates from now on, I need to have like a notepad thing, so we just take notes so that when we watch these debates, since these people will never talk to us, it's good to just be able to spit out talking points against these fucking losers when they're on other platforms. And people should be spamming these talking points because these people will never defend or be able to defend the dumb shit they say. What are Dave's talking points going to be? If I had to guess, we'll just write down some guesses. Ukrainians are dying. We need a peaceful off-ramp. Ukraine is losing / can never win the war. Something, those three or something. Oh, and something about World War III. That would be my guess. We'll see what he says. Oh, maybe something about, we're loading this up way too much. Russia started because of NATO aggression. It's always something, some combination of those dumb points.
obviously, we'll have to see how things play out.
Dave, go ahead.
Well, of course, we should stop funding this. We never should have been funding this war to begin with. I think that in the original Cold War, which I still regard as one of the worst U.S. policies in modern American history, that did so much to ruin our country, and not to mention, like things like the Vietnam War and the millions of people who died in it. But at least in the original Cold War, I think there was always a healthy respect for the risks involved. And that all of us should, all sane people should recognize that the greatest priority in human history is that the United States of America and Russia do not go to war. And this was something that people in the old Cold War were very respectful of and aware of. The difference in this new Cold War environment is that no one in the upper echelons of power in America seems to have any respect for this threat. And any respect for, you could think to yourself, well, maybe this will work out in a positive way, that the U.S. is green-lighting attacks inside of Russia. Or perhaps it could be an absolute disaster. And we're playing with, when I say we're playing with fire, it's an understatement. We're flirting with potentially the most disastrous thing that could happen to the human species. If America is to have any role in this conflict, it should be working toward a peaceful negotiation. And in fact, the American role and the Western role has been to kill peaceful negotiations from the beginning of this war and to prolong the fighting. I think that, as John Mearsheimer said back in 2014, the West is leading Ukraine down the primrose path, has turned out to be the most accurate prediction on this entire conflict. And essentially, I think since the fall of the Soviet Union, American foreign policy, and just keep in mind, American foreign policy in the Clinton administration and in the W. Bush administration and Obama's administration, these are the same people who are in charge of the Middle East. And in fact, the neoconservatives were very focused on NATO expansion back in the 90s. You can go read the Project for a New American Century documents. And the same people who totally blundered foreign policy in the Middle East have totally blundered foreign policy in Europe, provoking Vladimir Putin and the Russians at every turn, leading to this awful place that we're in. That is certainly, if you care about the Ukrainians at all, has been more of a disaster for the Ukrainian people than anyone else.
Yeah.
And Dave, Vaush.
Okay, so I think we had the Ukrainians are dying. America should only be negotiating peace, like the peaceful off-ramp. He didn't say Ukraine is losing or can never win the war. We didn't hit that one. And then the World War III one, and then Russia started because of NATO aggression. We provoked them, basically. Okay. Geez, what do we have? So many different stupid claims here. He says we should have never been funding the war to begin with. Opposes the U.S. doing... was he implying that we shouldn't have been involved in the Cold War at all? Or what I don't even understand what the Cold War statement is there. Dave Smith flirts with this weird libertarian position where he becomes like this hardcore isolationist. or is opposed to literally all sorts of foreign intervention, I guess. That's just like his position through all of human history. Let's see. He says, no one in the United States has any respect for going to war with Russia. Is this despite the pretty clear lines that Biden drew for not actually sending troops or anything to Ukraine? So that doesn't seem to be true. America's only engagement with this war should be to negotiate peace. That's a patently stupid claim. The United States has a whole host of options available to it. I don't know why the only thing we would be doing is begging Russia for peace when Russia is invading Ukraine. I don't know what would we say to them. Please stop. Claims that, especially if you're going to source Mearsheimer here, aren't we all about realpolitik? Why the fuck would you listen to somebody negotiating peace if you're not willing to back it up with any kind of force? And then claims that everyone else provoked Russia into invading Ukraine. That just doesn't line up with any of the timelines. There were no... 2014, the invasion happened because Yanukovych fled. In 2022, I mean, they invaded as the southeast shit in the Donbass, continue to rage on. And I don't know if Ukraine was close to closing that out or if that was still like drawing out or not. But like the idea that there is no, what is the provocation from the West? What do you say here? I don't know how I want to structure this yet. We'll just keep going, I guess.
Made a point that I think you hear a lot from defenders of U.S. support for the Ukrainian war, and that is you can't allow other countries, you can't reward other countries for invading other countries. You just can't do that. We can't have that. What's the response to that? We can't have that argument.
Well, I mean,
you can't reward countries for invading other countries. What's the response to that? It's a decent question. Dave.
What's the response to that? We can't have that argument.
Well, I mean, first, I would just point out how absurd it is that after the last 20 years of terror wars, somehow the United States of America still gets to put itself in the position of global peacemaker.
Begins the answer with strange Iraq PTSD. What aboutism? Vaguely notions towards America's wars, implying that the U.S. has absolutely no role to play in world affairs, I guess. Stupid.
As if our major concern is that bigger nations can bully smaller nations. I mean, over the last 20 years, there's been no greater purveyor of violence than the United States of America.
Do I have color? Let's see. I should highlight huge lies. Over the last 20 years, there has been no greater purveyor of violence than the United States of America. Is it Alt-C for color? What is the total amount of lives lost? Hold on, I'm sorry, real quick in YouTube chat. I love Destiny ignoring his point by calling it PTSD. The reason why I call it PTSD is because there's a branch of incredibly fucking retarded Americans that cannot see any foreign policy decision without immediately bringing up the Iraq War. That's why I call it Iraq PTSD. It is a morally bankrupt and intellectually deficient position. It's morally bankrupt because the fact that we made one mistake in Iraq and Afghanistan doesn't preclude us from ever participating in world affairs again, number one. And number two, it's intellectually bankrupt because comparing every single conflict to that of Iraq is fucking retarded. Ukraine and Russia have absolutely nothing in common with Iraq and Afghanistan. We have very good reason to defend Ukraine. It is a sovereign state that is being invaded by another sovereign state for no good reason. The invasion into Iraq was questionable if you were being the most charitable and downright insane if you're being realistic. There's no good reason to go into Iraq. Just because Iraq didn't have a good reason, Afghanistan arguably had a better reason. Just because Iraq didn't have a good reason for our intervention there doesn't mean that all of a sudden all intervention is bad and all intervention is the same. Anytime somebody brings up Iraq, this is why I call it the Iraqi PTSD. It literally makes absolutely no fucking sense whatsoever. Dave Smith and a whole like bucket of dipshit ass fucking isolationist policy people would literally sit in a fucking movie theater lobby, and their girlfriend is looking, and they're like, oh, like I don't know, what movie should we watch? And he's like, watch a movie. We're gonna be sitting for how long? That's like the Iraq War. How long are we gonna be here for? Another 20 years? It's fucking stupid. Every single thing is not Iraq. Every single thing is not the Iraq War, okay? One mistake, Destiny Bra. See ya, permaban. "20 years of mistakes, trillions of dollars, millions dead, one mistake, Limfeo. Destiny is retarded." Oh, okay, so I'm sorry. Do you think Christopher Blowers, let me hear you say it in chat. Can you say like, oh, I would prefer Russia or China to make the moral decisions for world invasions from now on? Type that in chat. Show it to me. Show it to me. Let me see it. Say it. I actually think Russia would be more moral in terms of how they decide to conduct world affairs. How many millions are dead? Let's trust these people. I don't even know what the fuck that sentence means. Go to Russia, please. I'll pay you. I'll pay you. Send me the money for your family. I'll ship all you fucking retards there. We don't want you anymore. We don't need you, okay? Please get the fuck out of my country. Okay, back to this. Oh, no, wait. Actually, wait. I kind of wanted to look this up. Over the last 20 years, there's been no greater purveyor of violence than the United States of America. What if we were to take every single conflict that the United States has been involved in over the past 20 years? You'd probably include every NATO one as well. Conflicts America has been involved in. I'm curious what the total numbers are on everything. Over the last 20 years, we'll be generous and we'll start in the year 2000. Wars, or we'll do conflicts. Conflicts that the U.S. has been involved in since 2000. I wonder how they count deaths for 200,000. I'm sorry, not 200,000. For 20 years of conflict. I wonder if, like, does every single death here count as a... That Wikipedia page didn't agree with him, so he aborted. We're literally reading it now. You're so cock-thirsty to, like, stare at something and find something that disagrees with you or agrees with you. Bleach. Order tons of it. Or Drano. It's probably even better for your digestive tract. Try it. It'll make you feel way better. Casualties and losses. Afghanistan war. We'll say 2001 to 2021. Dude, your brain is working overtime to find a reason to disregard things you don't agree with. What are you... I literally just opened this page. What are you talking about? Homie is really Googling raw Afghanistan and Iraq numbers to prove America not bad. Okay, never mind. Okay. Okay. Jesus Christ. The mass unban on YouTube was a huge mistake. Holy fucking AIDS. The problem is that the U.S. should aid Ukraine, but Destiny somehow seems incapable of reaching a convincing and relevant argument. Hop onto Discord, my dude. Come to the disagreements room, okay? That's where I'll be waiting for you. Okay. I'm not reading any chats. Okay. Afghanistan war was a 20-year war. All, should we count casualties or just deaths? All deaths taken directly from wiki pages. Total deaths on U.S. side, 76,000. 591. Total deaths on... What would we call this? The Afghanistan side? Probably just the Taliban side. Taliban side... All right, state your disagreement.
I'm not him. I just want to say hi and love you.
Boom, boom, boom. That guy's perma-banned from the server. And I put a note in your account to never unban you. So good luck. What do you want? Make it relevant and make it fast.
Yeah, sure. I wanted to talk about the Biden debate.
Nah, do it tomorrow or the day after, maybe. We're going over another debate.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I just want to say I actually think Biden did really well. I think the only reason people say that debate's a disaster is because they're not actually listening to what was said in the debate, and they're just looking at Biden as, like, an old man and shit. Yeah, he seemed less healthy in general, but he was definitely a lot fucking smarter than Trump. Trump was like an unhinged fucking lunatic who was just spewing nonsense the whole time. The moderators had to like ask him multiple times to answer these fucking questions. At one point they had to ask him 3 times in a row to answer the question, and each time he just started rambling about how he hates fucking immigrants.
Okay. Well.
But yeah, if you have a differing opinion to that, then maybe we can talk about it tomorrow.
All right.
All right. Take care, dude.
Have fun, bye.
Also, feed your cats vegan.
Gotcha. U.S. intervention in Yemen. part of the War on Terror and the Yemeni Civil War. How the fuck are there confirmed drone strikes from the United States? How do they know if it comes from the US or like Saudi Arabia or any other country? 2001 to present. Okay. No, we'll say 2009 to present. 2009 to present. Jesus fucking Christ. Everybody in the fucking world. Total deaths on Yemen side. We'll say 1,400 militants. And about 200 civilians. 250 civilians? Maybe, I guess. Let's see, we have the Iraq War. (2003 to 2011). Total deaths on US side, 27,163. Total deaths on Iraq side, we'll say about 50,000. Documented deaths from violence. Opinions research business. Oh, these are casualty counts. 2 stars. Total excess deaths includes all additional deaths due to increased lawlessness, degraded infrastructure, poor health care. Okay. At Destiny, the biggest thing in this argument is probably that they think the vast majority of these wars were unjust. We liberals think they were just. Even if we showed the number of deaths is lower than some other nation, they will move the goalpost to saying we did bad stuff, so they don't care about the numbers really. I don't care. His claim was...
last 20 bigger nation of United States of absurd it is that after the last 20 years of terror wars, somehow the United States of America still gets to put itself in the position of global peacemaker, as if our major concern is that bigger nations can bully smaller nations. I mean, over the last 20 years, there's been no greater purveyor of violence than the United States of America.
Over the last 20 years, there has been no greater purveyor of violence than the United States of America. That was his claim. Not that we did bad things, not that we made mistakes, not that we've done evil stuff, but that there was no greater purveyor of violence. No greater purveyor of violence. That's what he said. So let's just look up the numbers. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head for every global conflict, but let's see. We'll say, if we're generous, total civilian Iraqi deaths. Civilian deaths recorded. We'll say 105,000. Between here, Iraq body count. Is a web-based effort to record civilian deaths resulting from the U.S.-led 2003 invasion in Iraq. Included are deaths attributable to coalition and insurgent military action, sectarian violence, and criminal violence, which refers to excess civilian deaths caused by criminal action resulting from the breakdown in law and order. we'll just record them all. See what it ends up being. U.S. intervention in the war in northwest Pakistan. (2004 to 2018). Just use AI. That's a perma-ban comment. Any suggestions on using AI just gets you banned. Boom. See you later. Militant deaths, we'll say about 2,750. Civilian deaths, we'll say about 600. Second, U.S. intervention in the Somali Civil War. Is it worth adding it if it's just like in the hundreds? I don't think this is worth. Operation Ocean Shield. Somali pirates get dunked. International intervention in Libya. That's a big one. People didn't like. U.S. intervention in Libya. Total deaths on Libyan civilians, maybe 250. Operation Observant Compass in Uganda. Deaths aren't even listed. U.S. military intervention in Niger. 32 militants killed. Don't care. Okay. U.S.-led intervention in Iraq from 2014 to 2021. (2014 to 2021). Total deaths of ISIS, 70,000 killed. Total civilian deaths in Iraq, 6,000 civilians. U.S. intervention in the Syrian Civil War. Jesus. We'll say about 3,850 total civilian deaths. About 3,850 by airstrikes. U.S. intervention in Libya. And this is the current thing in Yemen. So total. Total deaths, if all are attributed to solely to the United States. We would say 55,000. $56,000, 106, 210, 213. Do we count? Well, we should do militants versus civilians. Enemy military. Enemy civilians. So Destiny's just not watching the debate, I guess. Bye, permaband. If you want to watch it, just go to the channel and watch it. This is what I do here. I fact check. It's boring and it's lame, and you don't like it because you've never watched anybody do it in your entire fucking life. There are so many loads to swallow on the internet. Please go suck one of them off, you degenerate subhuman fuck. Please. Um, 55 plus 1,400 plus 27, I think. Yeah, plus 50 plus 3 plus 70. Enemy military, we'll say about 220,000. One more dead enemy militants. And we'll say for civilians, $46 plus 105 plus 1,000 plus 6,000 plus 4,000. We'll say 162,000 or more civilian deaths. Okay. If we're giving all those, if we're counting all those civilian deaths for Iraq, then yeah, so we wind up with, over the past 24 years, we'll say we can attribute maybe about 220,000 or so or more military deaths, and then about 162,000 or more civilian deaths for the United States that's involved in conflict across the globe. Let's do other conflicts over the past 25 or over the other conflicts since the year 2000 and their fatality counts. Let's do Russia. List of wars, list of conflict involving Russia. Tim raised a point. What? Hey, Destiny, did you ever explain why you've been avoiding Biden/Trump stuff as we've approached peak election season? Honestly, because arguing and debating this type of shit is just really fucking boring to me. It makes me want to fucking kill myself. And it makes me hate my country that I just spent like a whole year learning to appreciate. Almost as much as it makes me hate some of the people in it. This is your bread and butter. Kind of, yeah. Is it true that you're working with the Biden campaign? No, there has never been any evidence whatsoever of any political party paying me some secret under the table thing ever in my entire fucking life. Unlike the other people whose shit you literally swallow directly, ingest directly from their defecating assholes, I actually have some kind of morals and principles, and I generally orient my political values around that instead of just following whatever the fucking trends are or whatever gets me the most fucking clicks or whatever, makes me feel the best and gets me on whatever fucking killer game in the video game. I don't even want to. Okay. Let's see. Russian conflict since the 21st century. Why do they get a thing like this? Template. Why do they have a different... Oh, list of wars involving Russia. Cute. Conflicts. The second... Oh. Russia. The Second Chechen War. Total deaths on Russian side. We'll say about 10,000. Total deaths on other Russian side. On Chechen side. Ooh, we got hugely different claims for military. We'll say about 10,000, I guess. Civilian casualties, total deaths. Total civilian deaths. I don't know enough about this conflict to know who these deaths are fairly attributable to. 30,000 civilian dead, 80,000 killed in Chechnya. That's the GFBV estimate. More neighboring regions, 40 to 50,000 killed, more than 600 killed during attacks on Russian property, total military, civilian. We'll say about 50,000. Is this whole project about what's interesting to you, or is it about what's good for our country and the media discourse? We need you in the trenches debating these idiots. Good for you. The Russo-Georgian War. Negligible deaths here. The Ukrainian war. What are our death estimates right now for this? This goes up to 20. This, Before the invasion, Russian invasion. It's super contested. Jesus, what a clusterfuck. $150,000 killed. What the fuck? French estimate. How many dead so far? Russia, Ukraine war. We'll guesstimate. We'll say total deaths on Russian side, 100,000 plus. Total deaths on Ukrainian side, 100,000 minus. Destiny. Dave would attribute these deaths to American aggression. I'm just permabanning every stupid fucking comment. I'll respond and then I'm permabanning you so I don't have to waste time. So if anybody else is stupid enough to ask the question, they'll get banned. You have to look the information up to know it before you can begin discussing it. Okay? You don't know the numbers, so you look the numbers up. If he wants to discount them, that's fine, but you have to start from knowing the information. Okay? Russia-Ukraine war, civilian deaths so far. This just says 30,000 civilian casualties. I'm guessing this probably hasn't been updated much yet. Total civilian deaths, 10,000. Russian intervention in the Syrian civil war. I don't think we need to attribute this to Russia necessarily. We've got the Central African Republic civil war, the Mali war, jihadist insurgency in Burkina Faso. Let's see, interventions here. Casualties. Okay, these numbers aren't too big. These numbers aren't too big, and these numbers aren't too big. Okay. Syrian civil war. Let's see, total deaths, total kill. Does this include civilians as well, or is this just militants and then this is civilians on top of that, or? Well, let's. Global Center for the Responsibility to Protect. This is a really, really, really shit source for this. There should be a rule in Wikipedia against sourcing important data from articles that just like incidentally like mention a number. Unless maybe this website, maybe they do their own calculations or something. Analysis. Okay, maybe, never mind. I'm sorry. Maybe they do for this. Okay, Tim. Oh, they don't really do an analysis of this, actually. No, this is a bad source for this. We'll say the total deaths are about 580,000 people. This says nearly 618,000 people. Okay, we'll just average it out. We'll say 600,000 people. Yemen war. Yemeni civil war. Syria has started what, 2011? Yeah. It's the Arab Spring. $377,000 plus people killed. 85,000 Yemeni children dead from starvation. Jesus. You aren't doing the meme of Russia did the Syria war, are you? If so, then you must add the Libyan conflict for America's death total then because of the fall of Gaddafi and Benghazi and the millions of migrants and crime that fled into Europe. The last half of that statement was so fucking retarded, I can barely even imagine you being able to feed yourself without spilling everything all over your fucking shirt and pants like the retarded, hand-shaking, knuckle-dragging, mouth-breathing, pants-sniffing, fart-inhaling, gasoline-huffing, hydrogen peroxide drinking, nose-picking, booger-eating, 45 IQ dipshit that both of your parents must have been to create somebody as fucking retarded as you. You're gone. Okay. I'm not counting all of the Syrian civil wars as Russian deaths. Okay. Trying to think of major conflicts. Okay. Oh, wait, hold on. Let's see. I don't know fuck all about African conflicts. Let's check. Genocides in 21st century. Sri Lanka Civil War. I ordered a shirt from your last merch drop. Do you know what the average lead time on those being delivered are? I feel like they would have been delivered by now, no? Jesus, fuck. Is this... Are these numbers... I don't know... What are the total years of this? Oh, this is from 83 to 2009. We'll just say Sri Lankan conflict through 2009, 170,000 civilian deaths. Wonder how many people died in the first Chechen war. God damn. 100,000 plus civilians, maybe? Or around 100,000? Since 21st century, 62,000 Nigerian Christians have been killed by Boko Haram. Sounds like an anime. The Boko Haram insurgency, we'll say 330,000 deaths total. During the Congo Civil War. Jesus. Congo Civil War. (1998 to 2003). Say about 350,000 deaths. Darfur. (2003 to 2005). Over 200,000 deaths. Got Chinese memers. The Rohingya. 2016 to 2017. 25,000 deaths. The South Sudanese Civil War. God damn. I don't know fuck all about Sudan. This is completely separate from all the Darfur stuff, right? It was like that was like a decade earlier, right? South Sudanese Civil War. 2018, 190,000 plus, or was 190,000? Wait, 190,000 deaths, 193,000 non-violent deaths. How many people do you think ISIS killed in total? I feel like the number... Wait, it can't be that high, right? How many people did ISIS kill in total? A million, perhaps? I feel like the number's got to be under, like, 50,000, no? They had, like, a lot of land and a lot of militants, but were they really... like able to blow up? It's not like they had like a ton of like air ordnance and shit. International Business Times. How many people has ISIS killed? Terrorist attacks linked to Islamic State, of course. 33,000 deaths. Okay, it's not really. Yeah, fuck it. Say about 33,000 deaths. Already got the Yemen war up here. Jesus, how many people have died in all this Ethiopian stuff? Let's see, the Tigray War. (2020 to 2022). God, Jesus, fuck. It's pronounced Tigray. More like your... You know what I'm saying. I'll say about 300,000 civilian deaths. Bro, I can't even pronounce this place. Nagorno-Karabakh. Blockade of the Republic of Artsakh. Artsakh. These aren't real places. I don't even believe this. This is fiction. Armenian population. Bullshit. Okay. How many people have died in this conflict? Jesus. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Okay, that's 541. I thought it was 541,000. Conflicts that Wagner Group has been involved in. I feel like if somebody wanted to say the United States has to take credit for every single death that like the U.S. has ever been tangentially involved in, then you would have to attribute every single death that the Wagner Group has been involved in to Russia. No, but it wouldn't even be close. Okay. So I feel like if I feel like a statement is super wrong and we have a red, we redline it, or that doesn't make sense. That's usually like crossing out on a term sheet or something. We'll put it in red. We should have like a challenging question that we could ask. And I think the challenging question would be, do you stand by the claim that the United States has been the greatest purveyor of violence in the 21st century, question mark, greater than Russia in all of its wars, plus the involvement of the Wagner Group across, it's mainly the Middle East and Africa, right? Greater than the multiple genocides / conflicts that have occurred in Africa over the past 25 years, including, question mark. Would you say that America is a greater purveyor of violence than Boko Haram, ISIS? Who are the parts here for Congo Civil War? Who are the parties here? So like I said, I don't know fuck all about like who's blamed for this or or the, I'll say Sudanese government, question mark? Shouldn't you be comparing America's violence to Russia and China? Boko Haram will never be the decider of... no, I shouldn't be, because he said that America was the greatest purveyor of violence. I think it's a wild. That's a wild statement. I don't think that statement can stand. Have you considered that he might not engage with the body count as the metric and make some shit up about destabilization or number of conflicts? Okay. I don't understand. This is how I... Let me explain this one time, okay? Before I just go back to banning all of you for the fucking retarded questions, okay? Somebody says, I think John is taller than Jane, okay? Oh, he said that John is taller than Jane. Well, okay. Well, when was the last measured height of both of these people? I want to look that up, okay? As soon as I say that, like, every fucking retard is like, well, what about if they measured them when they were wearing shoes? Or wait, what if those are older and now their height's different? Oh, what if when he said taller, maybe he only meant when the one guy had an afro? Like, just... You look up the numbers, you make the argument. If he does a counter argument, then you counter the counter argument, okay? If he wants to use a different metric, then you ask for the metric and you go from there. All I can do is go with what's presented in the conversation. I don't know what his counter response would be. Dave isn't a man of counter responses. He's a man of slogans and one-liners, okay? Jesus. All right. Good job. 6 minutes through.
Who has imposed its will on tiny, helpless nations across the world. As far as that, yeah.
The United States has imposed its will on tiny nations across the world. How is that any different than what Russia is doing? Than what Russia has done with Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova? Question mark.
It's not good that Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. And yes, certainly that's something we don't want to see.
Oh, good
My
job.
argument would be that America and the West more broadly had many opportunities, many off-ramps to put this fire out or at least calm it down. And at every single turn, poured more gasoline on this fire. That ultimately resulted in the invasion in 2022.
America and the West had many off-ramps to stopping this conflict, but chose not to, leading to the invasion in 2022. What off-ramps?
Yeah, so Vaush, how can the U.S. say with a straight face that it's not okay for other countries to invade smaller countries?
Well, I think it's kind of a cowardly non-argument because I'm not arguing in favor of.
Vaush, how can the U.S. tell other countries to behave? Question mark.
The moral. I think it's kind of a cowardly non-argument because I'm not arguing in favor of the moral superiority of the United States. That'd be a ridiculous position for me to take. It's not football. We're not taking sides like, waving banners. There are two levels to this when it comes to agency. We're concerned about the broader socio-economic.
Wait, I missed the conclusion. So was he right about the U.S. causing the most deaths in conflict? No, of course. It's not even close. It's ridiculous. Even as much as the U.S. is involved in everything else. No, it's stupid.
It's not football. We're not taking sides like, waving banners. There are two levels to this when it comes to agency.
Hold on one second. Okay, fuck. I have to just write down like major claims. I can't go through every single fucking thing because it'll literally take me 10 hours to do this.
It's like, waving banners. There are two levels to this when it comes to agency. We're concerned about the broader socioeconomic and geopolitical context that led to where we are now. And that goes back to the Cold War and even earlier. If we listen to Putin's justifications for the invasion, it goes back to the borders of the Russian Empire, And then there's like the immediate decision making. We mustn't remove agency from the equation. Russia invaded, by Putin's own words, in a sort of territorial land grab. The idea that it was entirely because of a response to Western aggression or NATO posturing is ridiculous and ahistorical. But that doesn't mean the West isn't responsible for helping to create the situation we're at now. We have to balance these two justifications.
Oh, Vaush's argument was pretty good, but he's granting way too much credence to, well, the West is also kind of at fault as well, but okay.
Our arrogance after the end of the Cold War, the fact that rather than reaching out to Russia as a potential future ally, we ostracized, with the shock therapy, the sort of economic devastation of Eastern Europe and the former Soviet states. These contributed to an environment in which future conflict was inevitable. It was reprehensible on the part of the Western governments to participate in this. Look today at the divide between former West and Eastern Germany. I mean, the reason that East Germany is voting so heavily for the AfD is in large part because they see it as a rejection of the doctrine of the West that left them behind after reunification. These should all be taken into account. And we
Is that true? I thought the AfD was just popular because of like immigration shit. I don't know fuck all about German politics, so.
must acknowledge that Putin is a fascist who did a territorial land grab. Those two facts don't contradict each other. They work together to create a complete narrative. With regards to the invasion now, I agree we have to take the threat from Russia seriously. And by that, I mean, we don't want this to scale out infinitely. We don't want this to turn into a global war. That's something we have to take seriously. At the same time, we have to acknowledge Russia does too. And their constant threats of nuclear war, the fact that they started this invasion, the fact that they have been posturing and acting aggressive towards Finland, towards the Baltic states, even like ramping up aggression towards the rest of Western Europe, we must consider again their agency. Now, I think that in the long run, there is a very deleterious consequence to creating an incentive structure where Putin gets to boost his national rep, his prestige, with a successful land grab in Ukraine. I think it would have been disastrous if he could have just marched west and taken the territory, because it would have reaffirmed and rewarded all the worst possible behaviors from him. That doesn't mean I think that we should sort of do a victory lap around Russia. Cold War II, let's win, let's trounce them in Ukraine. I do think that we're in a tough situation because we can't just like magically make Russia, I guess, a democracy or a country less incentivized to invade its neighbors or reclaim historical territory. It's a difficult question, which is why I don't like simple answers.
So, Dave, actually, here's an interesting point that Vaush just raised about the beginning of the war. And, if we may all agree, correct me if I'm wrong, that we all think it would have been bad if Putin had indeed marched into Kiev and took all of Ukraine, et cetera. But that leads us to the question, Dave, of how much U.S. involvement, if any, was just. If we agreed that it was good for the U.S. to perhaps prevent the Russian capture of Kiev, et cetera, at what point did it become too much? At what point?
That's a really good question. Let's see. Will Dave answer? Will he engage at all? Or will he just say, well, the only reason it started is because the U.S. caused it, and not actually engage? What is Dave's response here? Yeah, I mean, the U.S. caused it. We shouldn't have even caused it. That's a guess. What else could he say? The U.S. caused it. I don't know. That's my guess. I can't think of how else he would answer it. Because, I mean, the answer is you have to help at least a little, right? You have
is
to,
the
right?
Support no longer
or is he just saying, well, we should have tried to negotiate peace?
Or moral. How do you respond to that, Dave?
I think that the point that you could start at a lot of different points. I think the first round of NATO expansion was unjust.
Oh, there it is, yeah. God, he's so stupid. Fuck, I hate him. Dave. The first round of NATO expansion was unjust. Jesus. Is he going to qualify that? So the countries voting to join NATO because they want to be a part of NATO was unjust. Okay.
And was unnecessarily provocative of the Russians.
Was unjust and was unnecessarily provocative of the Russians. How early was what was the year of the first round of NATO expansion? Did this happen in the 90s? After Soviet Union collapse. Was it 2005? Somebody, I just saw that. Why did this guy say 2005? The alliance invited these guys to begin ascension talks. The alliance's Madrid summit of 97. These three countries became the first former members of Western Structure NATO in 1999. I should write up a note on NATO. And just to read through all of the expansion rounds and everything. Czech Republic, Hungary, and Poland would have been round one. And then the next was Bulgaria, and then Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Oh, and Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia. All of this was unnecessary and unjustified.
First round of NATO expansion was unjust and was unnecessarily provocative of the Russians. Let me just, I'm not exactly sure what Vaush is referring to as coward.
Why? Why was this unjust? Does Dave think that Russia should be able to indefinitely dictate the security arrangements of all of her neighbors? Question mark.
Cowardly
Dave Smith always seems out of his depth in these convos. I disagree. I think he always seems like he's super in depth because he always has these stupid talking points memorized, but he's very careful to avoid debating anybody that could push him on any of these talking points. He has one level deeper of talking points than the average person, but yeah, I've never heard him adequately challenged on any of them.
Was unjust and was unnecessarily provocative of the Russians. Let me just I'm not exactly sure what Vaush is referring to as a cowardly non-argument. I simply was directly responding to Ryan's point. If you have a serial killer who's killed far more people than another serial killer, and they claim that they're trying to stop a serial killer because they're so against killing, it's reasonable to point out that, no, this is in fact not what's motivating U.S. foreign policy, that no, the butcherers of Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and Somalia and Libya and Yemen are not actually motivated by some sense of we can't let big guys pick on little guys. Let's have an honest conversation about what's really motivating this policy. And it has been, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, to increase the power of the American empire. And Russia has always been seen as a force that's outside of the American empire. That's what's been motivating American foreign policy. This is what we're living through here is largely the neoconservative doctrine. It was the worst thing that ever happened in the history of our country, is that after we became probably the first ever true global superpower. About 10 years later, the neoconservatives got control of our foreign policy. And this was their plan from the very beginning. So no, I don't think America should have been involved in Ukraine at all. And I certainly don't think that that anything we've done has done anything except make this situation much worse and much, much more dangerous, because now you are experiencing a proxy war with the two biggest nuclear superpowers. I don't think saying any of that is reducing things down to simplistic.
These aren't even worth writing down. These are just so stupid. The only thing the U.S. has done is made things worse? Like, Russia were the ones that invaded, right?
Worldview. And of course, Vaush, you kind of snuck a straw man in there. I wouldn't say that this conflict is entirely because of NATO expansion, but to pretend like that's not a major driving factor in this conflict is to not be dealing with reality.
From now on, if I do a debate, I want to ask the moderator, can we go back and forth on single questions? It would have been nice for Ben Burgess too, but if I were to debate Dave, it would have to be the same. Dave, give me a justification for intervening in another country's foreign affairs. Answer that question. And you get like 10 or 15 seconds. Not these rambling, long, fucking pointless diatribes, these stupid fuck soliloquies where you just go on and on and on for minute after minute after minute. Like, just give me an answer. When would an example be when the United States should intervene in something? Is it never? Should there never, ever be intervention? Is there ever a justifiable reason for U.S. intervention? How should the U.S. respond to growing influence from oppositional countries?
And this has been admitted by all of the top people on both sides. And this was why so many people within the national security apparatus in the 90s opposed the first round of NATO expansion, explicitly because this will provoke a reaction from the Russians. Through the years, the Russians have been crystal clear that Ukraine was their red line. Thanks to the greatest journalist of the 21st century, the hero Julian Assange, who is thankfully now a free man, we know that the current head of the CIA, Burns, told Condoleezza Rice this explicitly. That this
head of CIA Burns, Condoleezza Rice. What did he say explicitly?
This was a red line, and not a red line in the way that America makes up red lines. Like Obama will say, if Assad uses a certain type of weapon on his people, that's a red line for us. It's all just ridiculous. This is a red line in a true sense, in the sense that Jack Kennedy said, putting nuclear missiles in.
Okay, he's not gonna. WikiLeaks. What can somebody tell me what he's referring to here? Condoleezza Rice, Ukraine, WikiLeaks, NATO, Russia. Maybe this. Earthling, the man who foresaw the Ukraine crisis. It's in the first paragraph. Wait, what? In The Atlantic, Anne Applebaum explains Vladimir Putin's militant position on Ukraine as a product of his peculiar biography, with special emphasis on his career in the KGB and his romantic attachment to Russia's bygone glory. Maybe before writing the piece, she should have interviewed William Burns, director of the CIA, back in 2008 when George W. Bush fatefully strong-armed European members of NATO into promising future membership for Ukraine and Georgia. Burns was warning that the consequences would be dire, but not because of Putin's distinctive psychology. In a memo to then Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, Burns wrote, Ukrainian entry into NATO is the brightest of all red lines for the Russian elite, not just Putin. In more than 2.5 years of conversations with key Russian players, from knuckle-draggers in the dark recesses of the Kremlin to Putin's sharpest liberal critics, I've yet to find anyone who views Ukraine and NATO as anything other than a direct challenge to Russian interests. Burns added that it was hard to overstate the strategic consequences of offering Ukraine and NATO membership, which he predicted would create fertile soil for Russian meddling in Crimea and eastern Ukraine. As Peter Beinart notes in his newsletter, Burns' analysis is at odds with the claim, lately made in many bloc communiques, I don't know what's the word, including album months, that the Ukrainian crisis is largely driven by Putin's fear of encroaching democracy. I mean, in 2008, was this conversation around when that was the Georgia invasion, right? Georgia invasion, Russia. Am I making that up? No, it was 2008, yeah. Okay. WikiLeaks. Following a muted first reaction to Ukraine's intent to seek a NATO membership action plan at the Bucharest summit, Foreign Minister Lavrov and other senior officials have reiterated strong opposition, stressing that Russia would view further eastward expansion as a potential military threat. NATO enlargement, particularly to Ukraine, remains an emotional and neuralgic issue for Russia, but strategic policy considerations also underlie strong opposition to NATO membership for Ukraine and Georgia. In Ukraine, these include fears that the issue could potentially split the country in two, leading to violence or even, some claim, civil war, which would force Russia to decide whether to intervene. Additionally, the GOR and experts continue to claim that Ukrainian NATO membership would have a major impact on Russia's defense industry, Russian-Ukrainian family connections, and bilateral relations generally. In Russia, the GOR fears continued instability and provocative acts in the separatist regions. End summary. Wait, what is the GOR? This was in February of 2008. Hold on. NATO expanded, but Russia's not allowed to. Sloppy Joes. The difference is that you vote in your country to join NATO. Russia invades and forces you to join them. Bye. During his annual review of Russia's foreign policy, Foreign Minister Lavrov stressed that Russia had to view continued eastward expansion of NATO, particularly to Ukraine and Georgia, as a potential military threat. While Russia might believe statements from the West that NATO was not directed against Russia, when one looked at recent military activities in NATO countries, establishment of U.S. forward operating locations, etc., they had to be evaluated not by stated intention, but by potential. Lavrov stressed that maintaining Russia's sphere of influence in the neighborhood was anachronistic, and acknowledged that the U.S. and Europe had a legitimate interest in the region, but he argued while countries were free to make their own decisions about their security and which political military structures to join, they needed to keep in mind the impact on their neighbors. Actually, wait. When were these cables released? They weren't released in 2022, were they? Can you see release dates on the WikiLeaks stuff? Or is that not possible? Ooh, The date at the top? This is the date of the cables. I don't think it's the date of the release. No? Leak. This was leaked in... this dates back to 2015. I'm just making sure this came out before the war started. Okay. Lavrov emphasized that Russia was convinced that enlargement was not based on security reasons, but was a legacy of the Cold War. He disputed arguments that NATO was an appropriate mechanism for helping to strengthen democratic governments. He said that Russia understood that NATO was in search of a new mission, but there was a growing tendency for new members to do and say whatever they wanted simply because they were under the NATO umbrella. Attempts of some new member countries to rewrite history and glorify fascists. During a press briefing of January 22nd, in response to a question about Ukraine's request for a MAP, the MFA said a radical new expansion of NATO may bring about a serious political military shift that will inevitably affect the security interests of Russia. The spokesman went on to stress that Russia was bound with Ukraine by bilateral obligations set forth in the 1997 Treaty on Friendship, Cooperation, and Partnership, in which both parties undertook to refrain from participation in or support of any actions capable of prejudicing the security of the other side. The spokesman noted that Ukraine's likely integration into NATO would seriously complicate the many-sided Russian-Ukrainian relations and that Russia would have to take appropriate measures. The spokesman added that one has the impression that the present Ukrainian leadership regards a rapprochement with NATO largely as an alternative to good neighborly ties with the Russian Federation. Ukraine and Georgia's NATO aspirations not only touch a raw nerve in Russia, they engender serious concerns about the consequences for stability in the region. Not only does Russia perceive encirclement and efforts to undermine Russia's influence in the region, it also fears unpredictable and uncontrolled consequences which would seriously affect Russian security interests. Experts tell us that Russia is particularly worried that the strong divisions in Ukraine over NATO membership, with much of the ethnic Russian community against membership, could lead to a major split involving violence or, at worst, civil war. In that eventuality, Russia would have to decide whether to intervene, a decision Russia does not want to have to face. Okay. Dmitry Trenin, deputy director of the Carnegie Moscow Center, expressed concern that Ukraine was, in the long term, the most potentially destabilizing factor in U.S.-Russian relations, given the level of emotion and neuralgic triggered by its quest for NATO membership. The letter requesting MAP consideration had come as a bad surprise to Russian officials who calculated that Ukraine's NATO aspirations were safely on the back burner. With its public letter, the issue had been sharpened. Because membership remained divisive in Ukrainian domestic politics, it created an opening for Russian intervention. Trenton expressed concern that elements within the Russian establishment would be encouraged to meddle, stimulating U.S. overt encouragement of opposing political forces and leaving the U.S. and Russia in a classical confrontational posture. The irony Trenton professed was that Ukraine's membership would defang NATO, but neither the Russian public nor elite opinion was ready for that argument. Ukraine's gradual shift towards the West was one thing, its preemptive status as a de jure U.S. military ally another. Trenton cautioned strongly against letting an internal Ukrainian fight for power, where MAP was merely a lever in domestic politics, further complicate. Okay. Was there ever... this is 2008. Was it did NATO ever make any formal promises to Ukraine about membership? NATO, Ukraine membership promises. This was 2023. Let's see. Before 2022. Myths and pretexts, or what I need to be before 2014. NATO promised Ukraine full membership in 2008, but without explaining how or when. Bucharest Summit 2008. Let's see. The alliance did not offer a membership action plan to Georgia or Ukraine, largely due to the opposition of Germany and France, but pledged to review the decision in December 2008. Even though Georgia was not offered a map, it welcomed the decision. So that is, let's see. We reiterate the decisions on enlargement are for NATO itself to make. NATO welcomes Ukraine's and Georgia's Euro-Atlantic aspirations for membership in NATO, but we agree today these countries will become members of NATO. Both nations made valuable contributions to the alliance. We welcome democratic reforms in Ukraine and Georgia and look forward to free and fair parliamentary elections in Georgia in May. MAP is the next step for Ukraine and Georgia on the direct way to membership. Today, we make clear that we support these countries' applications for MAP. Okay, so no formal offer, but they basically said maybe in the future. We believe in you. You're on a good path. Okay.
Cuba is a red line for us. We will blow up the world if you try to do that. Vladimir Putin, and as Burns pointed out, not just Vladimir Putin, the entire Russian establishment has been unanimous on this, that they will not tolerate Ukrainian entry to NATO. And look, it's not justified or reasonable for Vladimir Putin to have launched this war, but on the scale of geopolitical demands, the demand that Ukraine cannot be a part of the American empire's military alliance was a fairly reasonable one, and we could have avoided.
Let's see. Russia's demand that Ukraine not join NATO is a fairly reasonable one. Okay.
This whole war by just committing to that.
I have a quick follow-up on that, Dave.
We could have avoided this whole war by just committing to that.
If so,
sure.
All things, we're dealing in the reality that we did push for the NATO expansion in 2014 and all of that considered. Is your position that there should have been basically zero aid, military, whatever else, government aid to Ukraine after the invasion a couple of years back? Basically just none.
Absolutely. If there was any role for the Americans to play, it would have been trying to negotiate an end to the war. Unfortunately, if you're putting me in the hypothetical of you can't change anything before this, but you're already here, we had probably blown all of that goodwill, and there were better parties who would have been more suited for that. For example,
is he going to say China or Iran?
Going back to even the Bucharest summit in 2008 into the beginning of the Maidan Revolution, Germany was much more hesitant to get involved, to go down this path. There were other European countries who were kind of hey, let's not provoke the Russians. It's part of the reason why Ukraine didn't get a full map invitation in 2008.
He knows these facts. Good job.
The objection of the Germans. So probably someone else would have been better at it. Yes, essentially what I'm saying is that the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, the most war-hungry country in the world, the United States of America, shouldn't have been the ones at the table at all. And there might have been some goodwill from other parties who had more of an interest to avoid this catastrophe.
And if I may, there are elements of this that I guess don't make sense to me. First of all, the claim that America's decision-making is based on it trying to expand its own geopolitical power rather than any altruistic interest. That's true, but that's also the case for all countries. That's basic IR theory. So the idea of this neocon theory of America expanding its interest, that's just nation states. Russia's doing that right now. India's doing that. China's doing that. Everyone's doing that. We're better at it because we're a superpower, of course. But that's a fundamental rule of national exchange. I don't think that it's really a moral question. It's a matter of material conditions in a basic Marxist sense. Who's motivated by what and where they are. In the modern world, the imperial sphere of influence extends to the entire planet. American jets can reach any part of the world in 24 hours. Everyone's can if they have jets.
24 hours? It's got to be quicker than that, right? What kind of jet I don't know how fast our fastest jets go. What would be the opposite part of the world from the United States? What is the direct opposite part on the globe from Nebraska? Jesus Christ, there's shit down here? What the fuck is this place? I feel like these are like bonus places on an RPG minimap. Is the main settlement of the Kerguelen Islands and French, Southern and Antarctic lands and the South Indian Ocean. Who even sails down here? Who would find this ever? Like, you must be on like a death mission, or like, because these always get settled in like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Where it's like, who is even sailing around here looking for these with no GPS, no Google Maps? What the fuck? About 45 residents spend the winter there. The group can reach over 120 people in summer. Established in 1963. Oh, okay. Well, there you go. I guess. Jesus Christ.
There's no we get the nation next to us, which makes me think the idea that like Ukraine is more innately in the Russian sphere of influence is, I think it's a little bit old hat. At the end of the day, the people in Ukraine were interested in closer relations with the EU, and that is ultimately what triggered everything from Euromaidan, Yanukovych fleeing the annexation of Crimea, the invasion of the Donbass following the invasion of Ukraine broadly. This is, again, a complicated situation. I don't mean to detract from the influence that Western arrogance had in it. I would never try to do that. But I do think that, like, your roadmap for how things should have progressed from an American perspective following the 2022 invasion is misguided, because I don't think the world would be any farther from annihilation if Russia had simply marched westward, taken Kyiv, and we had a bunch of ginned up Russian soldiers right up against the border of Poland, you know, having just successfully annexed former Soviet/Russian imperial territory. You can imagine the propaganda coming out of the Kremlin about how they're reuniting their people. They're sort of like expanding the Russian interest in like a Duginist ethnic sense, you know, reclaiming the empire. I think that like the incentive structure behind that would be really bad. Like that, you're basically you're throwing chum into the water for sharks. You know, Putin is
the longest bombing runs ever were 2001 Nebraska to Iraq and back. Is that true? Bombing runs from Nebraska, it would be from Offutt Air Force Base to Iraq. Ellsworth bombers participate in Middle East airstrikes. How long does this trip take? How long for B-1 bomber to fly the total flight duration from Omaha to Iraq is about 14 hours. Yeah, fuck Vaush. Within 24 hours, we could get planes there faster than that motherfucker. God damn.
Expansionist. He's been sort of like preempting this for a long time with Georgia, you know, with his behavior with the Chechens. I don't think that that would bring us any closer to peace. Now, is the current path we're on right now the best possible road? Obviously not. Nothing we ever do is the best possible road, but I think it's closer to threading that line than just letting them march westward with Ben. What I'm interested in, I guess, is practical solutions now, outside of just letting Ukraine get annexed, which I really don't think would have been good for world peace in the long run, even if it would have quickly ended the conflict.
Wait, what is this?
This store is huge. I'm so disoriented. Oh, you mean disorientated? What? Never mind. What else do we need? Aluminum foil. You mean aluminium? What are you talking about? Oh my god. Okay, what else do we need? Let me check the list on my mobile. Mobile! It's mobile. If it was mobile, it would be spelt noble with an M. God, you guys just mispronounce everything? Okay, so what's this? Bottle of water? A bottle of water, is it? Gavna? Oh, a bottle of water. Is that how you pronounce it right? Is that the correct pronunciation? A bottle of water.
Okay.
how really don't think would have been good for world peace in the long run, even if it would have quickly ended the conflict. How do we incentivize Ukraine and Russia to come to the table and bring an end to this war? Can Ukraine regain its lost territory? I think morally it should be able to, because I don't like nations being rewarded for annexing adjacent territory. But logistically, can they? Would it be possible to end things where they are now? Would Russia keep Crimea and that just be seen as a kind of like dull historical injustice to fade away over time? And 100 years from now, people would be like, did you know Crimea used to be Ukraine? I don't know. There's so much dogmatism. And whenever you bring up like modern solutions, people go back to, I don't know, the end of the Cold War. I understand NATO is not exactly a global force for good, but what can we do now? I so rarely hear answers that are contextualized in the current moment.
Sure. Can I respond to that? Because there's a few that I want to answer your question at the end there, but just like a few things I want to point out. Number one, I think this is almost like bigger than just any political debate. It's a broader theme in life in general. I think anybody who's married, who's on the show or listening to the show knows this is true in personal relationships. There's a tendency to, if you're in an argument with your wife or your husband or something like that, to focus on what they did and what they did that's bothering you. But a much more healthy posture, if you're in a successful relationship, is that you also add in like, okay, well, what am I doing? How am I participating in this? What have I done that's kind of led to this situation? Generally speaking, I think that if you look at the corporate media, you're going to hear all of this talk about what Putin's done. And I think a lot of times in these debates, people can kind of claim to be like, well, I have a more nuanced position. I'm not simplifying things. I think the point of saying that, like, well, all governments are expansionist by nature, so there's no difference between the neoconservatives and, say, other groups of people. I'm not saying they're the same, but like a logical analogy, it's like, oh, well, all governments kill people, so like what Adolf Hitler's doing is just kind of the same as other governments.
Isn't that your entire argument, though? All countries have security interests, and Russia's just kind of worried about their borders, so they should be able to dictate the military alliances and the global preferences of all of her neighbors, because, isn't that like literally the crux of the foundation of Dave's entire argument for acquiescing to Russian geopolitical desires?
It's like, oh, well, all governments kill people, so like what Adolf Hitler's doing is just kind of the same as other governments. It's not exactly true. It's kind of different.
Destiny is going to war against Iran for Israel. More important or less important than the cartel state at our southern border? Does Israeli interest supersede American global hegemony? We're a big country. We can do multiple things at the same time, my friend.
In scale and in kind. To sit here and say, and look, if we have time, we could go through the history of Chechnya and Georgia and all this stuff. But
yeah, please. I'm sorry. What is the justification for Georgia, for the invasion in Georgia? I'm not as familiar with with either Chechen war. I'm sure he would justify both of those as well. It's crazy how if you're an enemy of the United States, America haters will endlessly justify like everything you do. I wish they would just go live there. Like, why not just go like do Russian propaganda in Russia, and then you could like broadcast from there, and everybody would love you. Putin would give you a state-ordered wife to suck you off every now and then. Like, why do you have to like rot our fucking wonderful, beautiful liberal democracy with your ahistoric, disgusting, like fasci cocksuck, worshiping of fascist authoritarian regimes? Why not just go do it over there?
Zoom out a little bit. During the Cold War, we drew the line at the Elbe River. Halfway through Germany. On one side was the Soviet Union, on the other side was NATO. And we're now talking about Ukraine, and you could sit here with a straight face and say, Putin is expansionist.
First of all, was the Soviet Union not expansionist? I need to research up through the Cold War. The implication he's making is that members of like the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union were held to the same type of restrictive existence as members of NATO. Is that the implication there?
And all this stuff, and in kind. To sit here and say, and look, if we have time, we could go through the history. During the Cold War, we drew the line at the Elbe River. Halfway through Germany. On one side was the Soviet Union, on the other side was NATO. And we're now...
You remember, that, like, for instance, like the Soviet Union, like Poland came under Soviet control via like a fucking invasion, right? Like literally like annexation of some of these countries, right? I don't remember how many of them, which ones, but like For some of them, at least, like these were literally like invaded and annexed. Like that's how they became part of them. That's like, I don't know why you would even compare these things. Like the comparing of NATO, yeah, even comparing NATO and the Warsaw Pact is like questionable at best. Although I don't know which restrictions Warsaw Pact countries were as opposed to Soviet countries. I am aware that broadly, if you were a Soviet country and you had a government, you could expect that that government is either going to be loyal to the Russian regime or your party is going to mysteriously wind up replaced at some point with a whole bunch of people that are also highly loyal to the Russian regime. And that is the expectation that your country will take. I don't know as much in terms of like Warsaw Pact country. Well, I guess what, fuck, I don't have time to read about this right now. Fuck. But,
you know, we're now talking about Ukraine, and you could sit here with a straight face and say, Putin is expansionist. Okay. I mean, if that's how you want to look at it, it's like, let's just look at the actual reality of what's happening here. It's not that Putin has been this expansionist force. Putin has been almost at every turn reacting to the expansion of the American empire.
What was the reaction in Georgia? What was the reaction?
And Ukraine, that's not, listen, that's just not true. It's not denying someone agency to say that they're responding to something. That doesn't make any sense at all.
Why does Russia, why do pootlickers constantly make realist excuses for Russian imperialism, but never allow for any reasonable motivations to be discussed for worried countries, Ukraine, Georgia, or other expansionist countries, or other expansionist bodies like NATO, question mark.
Everything. That's all life.
Sure.
No one just acts without you didn't fall out of a coconut tree.
That's just a cop-out. Not true. It's not denying someone agency to say that they're responding to something. That doesn't make any sense at all.
To everything. That's all life.
Sure.
No.
That is kind of true. A little bit reductionist, but he's being reductionist.
No one just acts without you didn't fall out of a coconut tree.
That's just a cop-out.
That's a cop-out? You're using the ultimate cop-out. The ultimate cop-out.
Doesn't mean anything.
You're the one providing the cop-out. You're saying that like it's
you.
not possible for Putin to have like a distinctly expansionist element to his rule because everyone's just responding to. So do you believe Putin has a distinctly expansionist element to his rule?
Okay, no, that's not a binary. One is it's not possible.
Wait, do you think he does or doesn't?
Hold on. So instead of just interrupting me, let me make the point. You just laid out a binary between is it possible he has expansionist intentions and does he have expansionist intentions? That's not a binary.
He's such a bad faith cuck. God, it's so annoying listening to this fucking lucid debate. Vaush fucked his words up there because it is possible that Russia is acting in its own interests in a way that's justified, but Russia could also be expansionist. But Vaush short-circuited the argument. Vaush correctly pointed out, with the justification that you're giving, or rather with the arguments you're giving, Russia is basically endlessly justified to do whatever they want, but you would never call it expansionist or imperialist. You would just say that they're responding to American pressure because America is all over the world. So are you saying that like it's impossible that Russia could be expansionist? That he needed to say that other sentence in there first because now the bad faith dipshit Dave Smith is going to jump in this like, oh, it's not a binary. It can be both. Okay, give me an example of something you would consider Russian expansionism. Give me an example of something you would consider Russian imperialism. Vaush should ask for that. Give me an example.
Possible he has.
Would you ever debate Mearsheimer? Absolutely yes. Absolutely I would. Set that debate up and give me 1 month to read, and I would love to debate Mearsheimer. Absolutely. It will be an incredibly boring stream for 1 month, but I would love the opportunity to do that. I'm all about disgracing hack academics. I would love to do it.
Interrupting me, let me make the point. You just laid out a binary between is it possible he has expansionist intentions and does he have expansionist intentions? That's not a binary. There are some expansionist desires that he has. No, in fact, if you actually like educate yourself on this topic, it was our CIA director who said in the Niet means Niet memo leaked by Julian Assange that it verbatim. This was a choice that Vladimir Putin did not want to have to make. This was a choice that Russia did not want to get involved in this war.
And he made the choice. He made the choice to invade, to bring troops down to the Ukrainian border, to commit to multiple years of, like, come on, this is the thing. I ask you for, like, what can we do now? And immediately it's back to the...
You should ask for that example. What's an example of a Russian expansionist or imperialist behavior? How would you even determine if they had any of that?
Well, hold on.
I know.
Vash,
I'm
hold on. Here's
familiar
what
with the
happened. I'm
history.
sorry.
I just
dude.
want to know in the
Yeah,
modern context.
I get it. Actually, what happened was you made a long statement and ended with that question. And I said, let me answer that question. But first, let me deal with what you said at the beginning of your statement. And then you started interrupting me. So no, it's not that I'm not willing to answer that question. It's that I had to point out, I think, a lot of the errors that you're making. Now, if you want just to say, what could we do right now? Well, look, we're going to have to be realists about this situation.
No, we're not allowed to be realists about a situation. If you wanted to be realist about the situation, then the United States should fucking annihilate. No, I'm just kidding. The United States should basically gather its NATO allies and European allies and ship as many fucking arms, as many fucking artillery shells, planes, tanks, rifles, bullets, whatever the fuck Ukraine wants to that country. That's what we should be doing. But instead, well, no, we've got to be realistic. America needs to tuck its tail between its legs and run as far away and as quickly away as possible because Russia, scary, I guess. Yeah.
Hey, what could we do right now? Well, look, we're going to have to be realists about this situation and admit.
Oh, no. I'm so sorry. We have to be realists and admit he's about to say, Ukraine's losing this war. Ukraine never had a chance. Ukraine's never going to have a chance. They're never going to win ever. They're not making any progress. That's the road that he's about to go down.
That Ukraine is losing this war and that they're not going to drive Russia out.
That has nothing to do with what was asked. Who cares? Even if they are losing the war, why shouldn't they be empowered to fight? Why not give them as much as they can to draw it out as long as possible if they want to? It's their desire to fight, right? Russia's the invading force. Make them bear the cost now. But
admit that Ukraine is losing this war and that they're not going to drive Russia out of Crimea. That's a joke. They're not going to drive Russia out of many of the territories that they've taken right now. We should be working toward a deal, a peaceful solution.
That's the realist solution. We have to. So Russia gets to invade whoever the fuck they want, no matter what the rationale, because they're scared of everything. But the obligation on us, our realist responsibility is infinitely cuck peace negotiations. Like, oh, did you just invade somebody else on your border? Like, oh, let's help you negotiate peace. I thought Dave was a libertarian. Why advocate for non-defense? What? No libertarian online is a real libertarian. It's either guys, 50% of them want to smoke weed, 50% of them want to smoke minors. That's the only fucking people online that identify as fucking libertarians.
Which has been on the table several times throughout this war, and it's been the West who has been trying to squash it.
Well, that's
what we should do.
Not true at all, though. You've seen, I assume you've read the deals that Putin has put through. Zelensky hasn't been particularly amenable to them himself. The narrative that the West is squashing the peace deals, which is blown up largely because of that one Boris Johnson visit early on in the conflict. Don't get me wrong, okay? The West has its own interests. There are plenty of Western leaders who would like to see the Russian armories depleted. But that doesn't mean that Ukraine would have been jumping in the bit for any of the deals Putin's been offering since the war began. And Ukraine hasn't been losing. Both countries have been stalling. This has been like a slog. And it has been since after the first 3 months of the war.
But Destiny, there's no way Ukraine wins. And I think the fear is that Russia uses nuclear weapons against Ukraine. I don't know if that's true, if there's no way that Ukraine wins. People think that the only path for Ukrainian victory is them annihilating the entire Russian military. But I don't know where the stronger will to fight is. It's hard to predict in the future what the Russian domestic situation looks like. And there are possibilities that open up for internal domestic pressure to push Russia outside of wanting to protract their engagement in the conflict. A Ukrainian victory doesn't just have to be like they obliterate everything on the ground and they take back Crimea by force and blah, blah, blah.
I don't like the narrative that Ukraine's losing because the fact that they exist at all at this point, considering the Russian armaments aligned against them, is pretty impressive.
I mean, they're pulling guys off the streets to fight.
Oh, yeah, but and Russia has their penal colony forces with the Wagner group pulling from their multiple rounds of really.
Why do people say that? And then she smiled. She smiled like she just like she had a fart that was smellier than usual, and so she smiles and she's so happy that this one was just the most flavorful. She can taste it in the back of her. Yeah, they have a draft. They have a draft. Oh my god, dude, what an actual fucking ingenious. Yes, they do have a draft. And you know what? I bet you can even find people that aren't happy they're getting drafted. True. Why would you ever appeal to that? Look at the polling in the public. Look at the support the public has for the ongoing conflict. Why would you appeal to yes, congratulations. Yes, they are indeed drafting people. Yeah, it's like an existential war for the country. Congratulations.
Really unpopular conscriptions, waves of immigration out of Russia. People. Russia has their penal colony forces with the Wagner group pulling from their multiple rounds of really unpopular conscriptions, waves of immigration out of Russia. People. No, of course not. I'm not arguing that like it's a matter of our investment or whether or not it's moral. You know, war makes, unfortunately, unethical decision making of every side, including the good ones. The Allies did plenty of bad stuff during World War II. I'm only saying that it's been a slog for both sides. I don't want to see this out in like I don't want this conflict to end in a way that's going to guarantee the conflict reemerges in 2 years. If you end up just setting the border right where the fighting lines are right now, we're going to be exactly where we were back in 2014. We're going to have a combination of like paid separatists and Russian soldiers like moving around in the Donbass. There's going to be constant exchanges of fire across the border. This needs like a real international solution. I don't know whether that means like a proper DMZ. I don't know whether that means like genuine reconciliation. Ideally for me, it would be some kind of like Hail Mary where Ukraine gets its borders back and there's like a massive like coming together between Russia and the West, and we like reopen trade and negotiations, but that's a little bit of a pipe dream. We do agree that, at least let's agree on this. If the line just freezes where it is right now, are we not guaranteeing another conflict in a few years?
I don't know that that's possible to say, to be honest.
So you're advocating for a position. Vaush should hammer on this. You're advocating for a position. Okay, I need to get used to doing this on the fly. So it's frame, function, further. Okay, so the frame is the United States should have an interest in reducing global conflict. The function would be that U.S. funding of Ukraine has the capability of stalling Russian aggression, and then the further would be future aggression from Russia is discouraged as a result of said funding, which satisfies our initial goal of we want a stable world. So he's advocating for a function. He's advocating for a plan of action. I couldn't use these words in a debate. Frame, further, function. He's advocating for a plan of action that would fully satisfy Russia's military goals, which is the disassembling of the state of Ukraine, that wouldn't even guarantee any amount of stability in the future. What the fuck is the point of that goal? Like even the ideal solution that he's going for of the U.S. being a peace broker seems like dog shit. Ukraine just needs to keep holding and win one big battle. Oh, Ukraine, sorry. And it could break Russian will to keep the war going and come to the table for talks. No one is winning now, but Russia isn't gaining important land now. Okay.
People be pretty mad. People be firing across the border.
It's not guaranteeing it. I don't know.
Ukrainians
you
and
do
Russians, especially at the front, are not positively disposed to each other. I feel like we need to give them something solid, a solid piece, not just like, oh, we've decided now the slog has gone on for too long. They'd be throwing rocks at each other across the border, you know? You could get a 5-mile wide DMZ and they'd still be like sending drones over with bricks to drop at each other's heads.
Maybe this is all.
It'd be rough.
With the case of in general, with all of the war hawks, everybody who's supported every single war over the last 20 years, it always kind of relies on this unfalsifiable counterfactual. Like, oh, if we didn't do this, then Vladimir Putin would be invading Poland right now. Or if the lines were drawn where they are, they'd be throwing rocks at each other. So it's very hard to say. I think the one thing that...
How about when countries are protected by the United States, like by joining NATO, those countries don't get fucked with? I mean, that seemed to be a big prediction about the strength of joining NATO, and thus far seems to be pretty true. I mean, for counterfactuals, if we look at countries bordering Russia, who gets fucked with? Belarus is basically a Russian puppet. Ukraine is being invaded and disassembled. Moldova was invaded and slightly disassembled. Georgia was invaded and disassembled. Who's not being fucked with? Oh, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Those aren't fucked with at all. Huh. That's really interesting.
Like, I think it's, again, to rely on a counterfactual, if that's what we're doing. I think the truth is that
What is your counterfactual? I'm so curious.
Again, to rely on a counterfactual, if that's what we're doing. I think the truth is that there were a lot of much better options. There were off-ramps.
There were a lot of much better options. There were off-ramps. What were the off-ramps? Can you give us one? They should have just ceded Crimea and just completely, let it go.
Throughout the path to get here. And the truth is that if you want to go back to 2014...
Oh my God, no way is he going to say that. Is he going to say that? If you want to go back to 2014, they should have just given... Well, or is he going to go with the more insidious one, the Victoria Nuland call? If we really wanted peace there, we wouldn't have instigated that revolution. We wouldn't have cooed them with CIA operatives. Is it going to be Ukraine should have given up Poland, or I'm sorry, not Poland. Ukraine should give up Poland. Is it going to be Ukraine should have given up Crimea, or we shouldn't have secretly used the CIA to instigate the coup in 2014? Is it going to be one of those 2 points?
All throughout the path to get here. And the truth is that if you want to go back to 2014, the West should not have gotten involved the way that it did. That it was such a provocation to back the overthrow of a democratically elected government.
There it is, Sam.
Government. All you have to do is think to yourself and just be honest here.
We're in the past.
Hold on, let me just finish my point. If Russia or China had backed the overthrow of the government in Mexico or Canada because they opted to sign a trade deal with us rather than the one that they wanted them to sign, what do you think DC would do? And we all know the answer to that. They'd overthrow that government in a second. And we have a Monroe Doctrine for a reason. And you can say that it's like some relic of the past that faraway superpowers ought not intervene in the region of other.
Is the Monroe Doctrine even like relevant anymore for U.S. foreign policy, or? I don't know. I'd have to go back and read. I'm not sure. I thought the Monroe Doctrine was basically like, if you're ever curious whether like wasn't so much like colonizing and fucking around in South America, I thought that was essentially the U.S. was like, hey Europe, no more colonies down here. Fuck off. These are our children. Okay, only we can coup these governments, not you. But I don't know how much. I don't know if that's like a thing that.
Large nations, but we certainly wouldn't feel that way. We wouldn't think it was a relic of the past if anybody tried to come over here and set up a military alliance with Mexico or with Canada. Tell me how much DC would go, oh yes, the Monroe.
I don't really think it's comparable though. Like, it's so hard to make that comparison. Mexico doesn't have any reason to feel like the United States will invade it and conquer it. How long have we existed besides each other's like as country? Like there would be no reason for like, what would the motivating factor be for Mexico to join like a Russian alliance? Like,
doctrine is just a relic of the past.
Do you think the Bay of Pigs invasion was justified?
No.
Like, we literally allow China to fucking buy land and shit inside of our fucking country around like our, like around like military bases and shit in fucking in Central and South America. Like, I mean, maybe not like the military bases of China or whatever, but.
Oh yes, the Monroe Doctrine is just a relic of the past.
Do you think the Bay of Pigs invasion was justified?
No.
Because the Soviets invested economically and militarily into a country that is just off our coast during a time of heightened international conflict. They knew.
That was such a. That was such a good counter argument. Shouldn't the Bay of Pigs have been justified? Wait, hold on. Wait. Oh my God. I have to remember that for a future thing. Wasn't the United States justified in trying to overthrow Fidel Castro, since the Soviets were so invested in establishing, oh my God, and it's so much more threatening too, because of the Cuban Missile Crisis and everything as well, like Jesus Christ. Nuclear capabilities from that island. Can you call Cuba an island? I think you can, right? Dave has to answer yes to this. How could you possibly say no? Please don't let him squirm away. Please don't let any of these fucking moderators bail him out. Please don't let him squirm away on this.
That it would antagonize us. We already had strained relationship with Castro, even though we didn't initially, of course, because we recognized that he was a much better leader for the Cuban people than the man he replaced. Do you not think the Soviets antagonized us in a way much comparable to what we have done with NATO and Ukraine? Like,
yes,
again, they did. Okay. So do you think then following the Bay of Pigs? Wait. This isn't a gotcha. This is a gotcha. I think it's an interesting question because I do think the Soviets were a little bit wacky with how they handled Cuba. But I feel like in retrospect, we don't talk about the Bay of Pigs invasion as an inevitable consequence of expansionist Soviet investment in spite of our national interest. I think we think about it as like Kennedy's mistake,
Right. Okay. But see, a lot of the reason why we think of it as Kennedy's mistake is the logistics of it. By the way, if you really want to get into it, it wasn't Kennedy's mistake as much as it was the CIA's.
The previous administration.
But regardless of any of that, see, what you asked me is if I thought the Bay of Pigs was justified. And I would also say that, no, I don't think Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine was justified.
Well, if we say that his invasion was unjustified, meaning no moral justification for it, because you've given a practical justification for it, but let's be good faith, and let's assume that he means it wasn't morally justified, because it must have been practically justified. If it wasn't morally justified, then we're saying that it's a moral wrong is there no obligation at all in the world if not to oppose moral wrongs? Like, what the fuck are we supposed to ever be against if not for things that we would all agree are wrong? Like, what are we supposed to oppose?
Do I think that the Soviets and the Cubans were taking a provocative stance against the United States of America? Of course. Did those provocations lead to the Bay of Pigs? I think that's undeniable. And the truth is that Vladimir Putin's got a much stronger case about the provocations of the United States of America, because it's not just one little island or one economic deal. It's been a steady push eastward since the late 90s.
What do you mean it's not just one little island? The big deal for Cuba, all of my history sucks that I haven't especially studied. Today, around the world, the United States and Russia, I'm pretty sure, can nuke fucking anybody anywhere at any point in time from like 3 different ways, right? Land, air, sea. A submarine can pop out, nuke some shit. Planes can go and nuke shit. Missiles, ICBMs can launch and nuke shit. Today, we take that for granted. Like, you just know, like, everybody can nuke everybody, like, at any point in time. However, back in the Cold War era, especially in like the 50s, early 60s, I don't believe that the nuclear launch capabilities were that sophisticated, which I think was one of the big reasons why Cuba was considered such a strategic location, because nuclear missiles parked in Cuba had so much more strike capability inside the United States in a timely manner, in a targeting manner. Like, the capabilities were way more fearful. That's why the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. It was the idea, like, hold on. I don't think you can ship missiles to exist like right off the fucking coast of our fucking country that can launch nuclear warheads into our fucking country. That's wild. Which is why I think Cuba was such a big deal. When were the first ICBMs tested, made, in production? So the very first one was online in '59. I think Cuban Missile Crisis was, I don't know anything. I want to say 61. Cuban Missile Crisis, and before it was like in fucking 1990, fucking 8. Oh, 62. Okay, 1962. And before 2004. We had missiles in Turkey that were withdrawn after the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay.
Island or one.
All this to say that placing nuclear-capable missiles or nuclear warheads with launch vehicles inside of Cuba was seen at the time as being a major escalatory step towards nuclear war. Today, even if Ukraine joined NATO, I don't really think it would be seen as, like, if we wanted to, we could just ship fucking nuclear missiles up to the Baltics, or we could just fucking fly them in with a fucking plane, in like 20 seconds. Like, I don't think that Ukraine joining NATO isn't, like, I don't think is seen as an escalation in that nuclear pathway. I mean, you could like cry and say, "Whoa, our borders, blah blah blah," but in reality, like, it's not comparable to how scary I think the Cuban Missile Crisis was for the world at the time.
Longer case about the provocations of the United States of America, because it's not just one little island or one economic deal. It's been a steady push eastward since the late 90s.
But now that we are where we are, oh no, go right ahead.
Before we go too far, I just want to stand up for the dignity of the Cuban Revolution for just a moment.
Please.
God, you're so cringe. Ah, the white savior.
It was surprising development.
Yeah, it was not a Soviet project. This was an organic Cuban project against the corrupt elites in Cuba. Fidel Castro, in the beginning, thought he could maintain some decent relations with the United States.
That's right.
It was Che Guevara who witnessed in 1954. He was in Guatemala when the U.S. overthrew Arbenz, and he was the one always saying to Fidel Castro, "You're not going to be able to work with the Yankees. Like, it's not possible." Castro wanted to. Like, he was like, "Look, no, these guys are corrupt. I'm George Washington here. It was only when it became impossible for the Cubans to work, for the Cuban revolutionaries to work with the U.S., that they went in the Soviet direction.
And in fact, Ryan
doesn't make it just, but well, go ahead.
I don't have the background on this, but just listening to Ryan summarize literally any other international thing, I would actually assume. Actually, I feel more informed on this conflict now because I would just assume the exact opposite of what Ryan said, and you probably have some understanding of what actually happened. I would just assume the exact opposite of what he said.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I also believe that Castro had been rejecting communism up to the point that the U.S. started putting embargoes on him before he then said, "Oh yeah, I'm a communist." And so you could certainly argue that we drove him into the hands of the Soviets.
Right, and I think it plays further into the broader dynamic where basically everybody acts as a reaction to previous acts. Very rarely does something sort of come up whole cloth. You almost always, even for the United States, I mean, with all of our power and might, we are still responding to the actions and decision-making of agents that are of themselves responding to others. In the world today, where we are now, because there are a million places that I could have turned the clocks back and changed history and brought us to a different point. For me personally, the big line wasn't with NATO. It was with economic investment in Russia and the shock therapy.
Is everything bad that happens in the world the fault of the U.S.? Yes. Every single thing that happens in the world that is bad is the United States' fault.
I think that was the real line where we lost the post-Cold War world, where we arrogantly decided that, having won over the Soviets, we would do a victory lap by annihilating their economies, arrogantly pillaging them and leaving them to the oligarchs who would work with us in a business relation sense. If there was anything I could go back and change, it would be that. I'm not really particularly fussed about NATO in particular. Military alliances are always going to carry with them, let's say, problematic elements. NATO is just the Western military alliance, everything that insinuates and carries. If we got along with Russia properly, maybe all of this could have been avoided. I mean, hell, it could have extended far enough east. We could be on better relations with China. We wouldn't have people like Trump trying to constantly push for a second Cold War with the tariff. And well, Biden did that too recently with the electric vehicles. So I guess everybody wants a Cold War with China. Things could have
really started with Obama.
Yeah, no, because we need a foreign threat. We need a foreign threat.
Exactly.
Russia wasn't doing it for us, and they're certainly not going to be doing it now.
Who do you think really needs a foreign threat? You want to talk about needs a foreign threat? What about Russia? What about Putin? Are you serious? This guy gets a huge bump in approval every time he conducts some kind of foreign operation.
So let me just say, because I think there's something almost being lost here where, look, technically speaking, you are right that everybody is reacting. And you are right that every nation is, I'm a radical libertarian. I think basically, essentially all governments are criminal organizations. So you don't have to convince me on that.
We are glazing Vaush because Destiny hates Dave more right now. No, it's because he's making better arguments. Is that, are you a Krispy Kreme donut? And every single thing that you see has to be seen through the lens of somebody glazing something? Or are you an extra on the set of your mom's bukkake cuckold porn fest where you're actually being glazed by the extra loads that are bouncing off of your mom's silicone fake tits? And that's why everything looks like a glaze to you. Bye.
The thing here that separates things is that after 1991, America became the first global superpower. The level of power, it's funny, I have to explain this to a leftist, but the level of power that America...
It's funny, I have to explain this to a leftist. Nap? Nap? Am I tired? What does that mean? Nap? Nap? That thing I want to take after I get railed by anybody with more than 97 IQ? Nap?
Had was totally asymmetrical to explain this to a leftist, but the level of power that America had was totally asymmetrical to anything else. And
I'm
so,
just hearing
yes,
this for the first time.
Right. And so yes, it is it is true that there are all of these different nations that are reacting to different things. However, if you actually look at the role that the United States of America played, and then think about it from, say, the Russian perspective, that this is not something that you, and you may say from your perspective that, the NATO military alliance isn't your biggest concern. Okay, but it is the Russians. And you have to see from their perspective that they would see this as a threat that they cannot live with.
The real question is, why is Russia so threatened by NATO? That's the billion-trillion-dollar question. Is it because they're worried about a NATO invasion? Or is it because they're worried that they can no longer invade their neighbors?
And the fact is that the idea of Ukrainian entry into NATO was something that was floated out for years, and not just in 2008 at the Bucharest summit where they announced that Ukraine and Georgia would be joining NATO, but for years after that. And then more and more involvement, especially after the coup in 2014, joint military exercises with NATO and the Ukrainian military, which is part of the reason why Vladimir Putin did not have such a quick, decisive victory right away, as he probably would have before that time period.
In 2014? Wait, what? There was just the civil war in the southeast. What's he talking about? Wait, what?
Military exercises with NATO and the Ukrainian military, which is part of the reason why Vladimir Putin did not have such a quick, decisive victory right away, as he probably would have before that time period. But that from the Russians, more at the Bucharest summit, where they announced that Ukraine and Georgia would be joining NATO, but for years after that. And then more and more involvement, especially after the coup in 2014, joint military exercises with NATO and the Ukrainian military, which is part of the reason why Vladimir Putin did not have such a quick, decisive victory right away, as he probably would have before that time period. But that from the Russian perspective, you have the global empire, the most war-hungry country in the world, very clearly committed to encirclement. Obviously, this is going to be a recipe for disaster.
And yet, Ukraine's desire to be protected by NATO has been validated by Russia's expansionism.
Well, okay, can I just a couple?
Go ahead.
No, I just want to finish that point, if I may. Again, you say Russia's greatest fear is NATO. Ukraine's greatest fear was Russia. Who ended up being more justified?
Well, okay, so that's
NATO hasn't invaded Russia.
Oh, yes, that's my question. Why is Russia so threatened by NATO? True.
Russia did invade Ukraine. There's no getting away from it. At the end of the day, this powder keg was ignited by Russia. And here we are now today with the gunpowder having already left the blaze. Where do we move forward? Because I keep asking, I feel like it's always like, I said before we started the show, you may recall, whenever I debate Israel, you say, it's wrong to genocide these 30,000 such and such Palestinians. And then the people you argue with, the Zionists, they'll go, oh, but what about Camp David? What about the Accords? They draw back into history because they want to avoid the question today. They want to avoid and turn the eyes away from it.
But I'm certainly not avoiding that question. And as I just said a couple minutes ago, it was wrong for Vladimir Putin to invade, and it's wrong for him to be killing people. Right. Well, I also answered that. But look, this idea that, first of all, the concern from Vladimir Putin was never, and not even Vladimir Putin, the Russians in general, the concern was never as simple as, is NATO going to invade us? The concern was...
Though, oh my God, if he gets this, I'll be so surprised. My take, this is a very, very, very fucking dick suck America take, my take is that the fear is Russia doesn't want to see successful, thriving democracies on its borders. Because when you have successful, thriving democracies near you, it makes your own people incredibly unhappy with the current state of affairs. But Dave is probably going to say Russia's worried about color revolutions and covert CIA infiltration and conflict on its borders. He's going to go with that. That's the answer he's going to go with.
Russians in general. The concern was never as simple as, is NATO going to invade us? The concern was moving military hardware closer and closer to Russia's borders. Okay, so the concern is more akin to the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh, I don't even know. Wait, well, what do you mean? So then the concern is an invasion or an attack. You just said that wasn't their concern, and then you restated the exact same thing. Okay.
Not that we were ever worried Cuba was going to invade us, but moving military hardware that close to our borders was a legitimate concern, and one that Jack Kennedy said he would blow up the world over.
It's not the same time period. We're in different worlds now between these two things.
Americans, however they feel about the Bay of Pigs, look at that as fairly justified, that was a threat. We couldn't live with a knife to our neck. Now, to your point that Ukraine's biggest fear was Russia, and that they just wanted to join NATO because they had this fear of Russia, that's not exactly true. Like, if you know the history of this situation, it was in 2000 of Russia. That's fear was Russia, and that they just wanted to join NATO because they had this fear of Russia. That's not exactly true. Like, if you know the history of this situation, it was in 2000, oh man, I think it's 2008. So it might have been 2006, but there was the State Department admitted that one of the big problems they had is that Ukrainian entry into NATO was just not popular in Ukraine. They estimated that it was about 30%. And so they embarked on a campaign. They literally said, we need the NED and we need the USAID to intervene more to get this support up for NATO membership amongst the Ukrainians. It's not, look, Yanukovych was elected in 2010, and these elections were verified by the EU, because we're all, neoconservatives are such believers in democracy, but only in the places where we feel like we need to import democracy to.
I don't think
not necessarily in Ukraine.
The legitimacy of those results.
Well, okay, but I'm saying it's not as simple as saying that overwhelmingly the Ukrainian people just wanted to join NATO, and DC was just, respecting the wishes of the Ukrainian people. That's not what's happening.
I'm never saying that the West is acting out of altruism. I would never be that silly. And I'm not.
No, but that's not I'm saying that your point that Ukraine just wanted to join NATO because they feared Russia.
But let's turn the clock forward, right? The Russian economy was stalling. The EU's economy was booming. The Ukrainian people were more interested in economic ties with the EU than they were with Russia. Yanukovych, against the will of the people, and yes, he was democratically elected. Democratically elected leaders can do unpopular things. That's life. He then turned towards Russia and said, because Yanukovych was, and we don't have to get into it, let's say, compromised by Russian interest, the people revolted. America supported the Euromaidan revolt because we were interested, of course, in Ukraine having closer
supported how?
ties to us.
I think it's important because Dave thinks that support was like that we basically instigated it, and through covert ops we were like shipping them fucking weapons and training soldiers to go and like fight against fucking Yanukovych's police.
And you can take a look at polling from the time, the Ukrainian disgust with Yanukovych's decision was authentic and widely reflected. Yanukovych fled, of course, fearing for his life and well-being. They took his little wealthy boy palace. And then after that, of course, you have the annexation of Crimea and the separatist movement in the Donbass, which was, of course, heavily supported by Russia. And then, of course, after that, they want to join NATO because they realize that the moment they do anything that Russia doesn't like, Russia's just going to turn the military on them.
So, Vaush,
you have to keep moving the clock forward.
But let me just interject there and ask. So we're $175 billion into this as the United States. The Ukrainian death toll is at least 31,000 people. It's probably much, much higher than that. Both sides, minimum around 100,000. But again, probably according to a lot of analysts, much, much higher than that. So to what extent can the United States, this is like higher than the NASA budget last year, the amount of foreign aid we're sending to you.
Since when is the NASA budget our point of comparison for literally anything? What the fuck even is the NASA budget? But NASA budget USA. AI overview gives me the entire budget. Thanks. Oh, $22.6 billion. Why? Since when is the... Why are we using the NASA budget as a guide to anything?
Ukraine. Is that just the United States spending that much U.S. taxpayer money to protect every inch of the Donbass with no plan, perceived as of right now, ostensibly no serious plan as to what a peace process would look like going forward? Is that a just outcome for the American taxpayer?
Oh, look, every dollar we give to Ukraine, we don't give to Israel. Okay, so it's like convincing your friend.
That's the best argument I've heard.
Yeah, right. It's like convincing your friend to spend money on cigarettes, not fentanyl. But I agree that Washington should have a more decisive plan. The lack of a plan, which is a common pattern, by the way, with both the United States and also Netanyahu, so not a fan of that tendency on all sides, is problematic to me. Like I said, now, if we just froze the war where it is, because of course, Russia, like Putin's peace deals are basically just like forfeit the territory you've lost up until this point. They're not like real conciliatory deals, right? Which, of course, Putin wants to keep the territory that he's gained. I think that if we just took that, if we pressured Ukraine into taking that, a war would break out again within a year, 2 years maybe, because you would have like the military buildup on either side of the DMZ would be like the greatest.
Vaush, sorry. Yeah, you started the conversation talking about not wanting this to be a stalemate that goes on forever. So last year we had this much vaunted counteroffensive. At the time, there were tens of thousands of younger Ukrainian troops who were alive and were well trained. They were well equipped. They launched this massive, much anticipated counteroffensive. It was a complete disaster, led to an enormous loss of life and loss of equipment. And so to your question of what do we do next, like why is it the case that a new counteroffensive with older, less well-trained Ukrainian troops and less well-equipped troops would be able to succeed against a more fortified Russian military while the previous one failed? In other words,
I don't know if it's quite that simple. I think that neither side actually had like the ability to actually conduct warfare at the beginning of the Ukrainian war. Both sides are in the process of learning. When we say that the current Ukrainian military is less trained, I don't have anything on the ground, but my intuitions point me that is exactly the opposite of what's the case. My guess is going to be that both sides are conducting warfare in a far more sophisticated way now than they were in the beginning. That the combined arms, the electronic warfare, that the drone usage, that the control for territory back and forth, the understanding of the capabilities of both sides and the ability of your own troops on both sides has probably been heavily improved on both sides since the beginning of the conflict. The idea that the people now are just less capable than they were in the beginning, I seriously doubt that's true.
Like, what is this Hail Mary that you're talking about that could change the calculation on the ground to such an extent that it's worth it to continue throwing Ukrainian men and women into the maw of this war?
Well, I don't like the term throwing only because they are, of course, engaged in it, right? They're not just being
they're being grabbed in many cases and literally thrown.
45-year-old men.
Well, literally thrown. Yes.
It's a draft. The country is fighting an existential war. Yes, it is. You know what the most disgusting... God, I hate these fucking people, and I hate this fucking dog shit ass fucking country. We actually do have a disgusting fuck country. The fact that liberal countries host their own criticism like this is fucking disgusting. And these fucking losers are right. We should be like fucking Russia. Do you think that either of these people... I don't know about the lady, because she's a little bit more reasonable. Do you think that Ryan or Dave would admit that Hamas grabs people and throws them in front of Israeli arms, that Hamas uses its because I don't know if I've ever heard Ryan, maybe Dave would admit to that. I don't know if I've ever heard Ryan admit to that his entire life. I'm curious, if you were to ask Ryan, who do you think conducts warfare and uses their population in a more ethical manner? The Ukrainians or Hamas in the Gaza Strip? I bet this motherfucker would say Hamas does. God, it's so fucking I know he would. God, I know he would. And I bet he would say Hamas has a greater reason to fight than Ukraine does. Ugh.
Ukrainian morale, or at least interest in continuing the war, is still high. But that sort of nitpick aside, I would only say, look, the Hail Mary is something that I hope for. It's not something that I think is guaranteed. With the introduction of ATACMS and other relatively long-range, munitions, we have the ability to sort of provide Ukraine the option to strike at depots, refineries, and facilities that are closer to the sort of back lines of the conflict. And that has had like a massive effect in the past 4 or 5 months since that was introduced. I don't know whether that's going to be a game changer in the war in the long run. I hope that it is, because ultimately I do think that a conciliatory position from Russia would be a better way of ending this conflict than one in which things just freeze as they are now. The DMZ buildup along the line that people settled on right now would be catastrophic, and I think it would just guarantee further war. My hope, and this is, I know perhaps a little naive of me, but I still have a little bit in me that hopes for this. My hope is that eventually, following the expansion of Ukraine's ability to strike at further back targets, this becomes increasingly economically untenable for Russia. There's pressure from both sides. Hey, this has gone on long enough. We literally can't keep this going anymore. We're both on fumes. And like two exhausted boxers on the 14th round, they both collapse into each other's arms. And, they have a Christmas Day in World War I. There's a moment where for a second, things get rough enough, long enough.
Now Dave is like, but you don't understand, actually. If we look at the total population and the total size of the Russian military, Ukraine doesn't have a chance. Not understanding that Russia can't mobilize its entire population because Putin would instantaneously find himself with at least 15 bullets in the back of his head with an unfortunate topple out of a 15th story fucking window in a high-rise building. Like, he's about to say, he's not going to say that. I'm sorry, I just wasted all that. He's not going to say that. I'm sorry, I'm just kidding.
That they collapse and they just can't do it anymore. And maybe the world breathes a sigh of peace as they finally do settle on whatever line they're at that point. I think
it's quite a dangerous game to play, man. I mean, I know it was the
it's
neocons.
all dangerous, right?
Well, sure, but I'm just saying, it was the neocons' hope that if you overthrew Saddam Hussein, democracy would sweep the region. And, that would have been nice, I guess. But
okay, I'm sorry. I don't even know what the fuck that is a response to. How are we this is what I mean when I say Iraq traumatized. This is what I mean when I say Iraqi PTSD. He did the thing where his girlfriend is like, can we go watch this movie? And he's like, that movie's 3 hours long. This is going to be just like the Iraq War. Are you crazy? Like, what? Like, I think that we should support, I almost said Saddam Hussein. We should support Ukraine in their fight against Russia. Okay, but remember what happened when we thought the Iraqis wanted democracy after we got, what? What is the
neocons' hope that if you overthrew Saddam Hussein, democracy would sweep the region? And, that would have been nice, I guess. But, the hope that, if they strike inside of Russia, that will make Russia realize that, this war just has cost us a little bit too much and we sure should knock off this war business.
You don't think that, you think that those two things are the same level of, okay, hold on, striking into, you think that if you get rid of Saddam Hussein, that you could install an entirely new form of government that all of the people in this region who traditionally never supported that government before would support the government? You thought that was possible. Well, clearly you were wrong there. So why would you think that shooting missiles into a country to damage its infrastructure would make them mad and reduce their desire for war? Like, one of these things is pretty simple. It's a pretty, easy connector from A to B to C. Like, if you start bombing somebody's shit, it's going to reduce their desire to fight. To some extent, right? Nobody wants to get their shit bombed. And it makes the war more real for Russians who can pretend that they're not even engaged in a war because it's just special military operations or whatever. I don't think that's a wild fucking take.
It's quite a risky game to play. There's a couple of things that I want to. Well, let me just respond to a couple things you said there because things that I think are pretty interesting. So, number one, just a couple points of correction. I mean, I know I said it was a good point in jest, but no, it's not true that every dollar that goes to Ukraine is a dollar that doesn't go to Israel. I mean, as you know, we print money out of thin air, and the U.S. government is quite fine.
Federal Reserve, no gold standard, fiat currency. Never mind the fact that a lot of what goes to these countries isn't actually money; it's actually old munitions.
Dollar that goes to Ukraine is a dollar that doesn't go to Israel. I mean, as you know, we print money out of thin air, and the U.S. government is quite fine to spend well beyond its means. So no, they can deficit finance through fiat.
Actually, historically, strategic bombing campaigns increase the desire for war. However, that's not exactly what Ukraine has been doing. maybe in cases of like total war where the entire population is like ready to fucking go ham. But I think in general, when a country is trying to hide the fact that they're in war, I don't think that them starting to get bombed by an enemy that they're pretending they're not at war with is going to produce warmer feelings from the population to want to do war. Or you know what? Fuck it. Who knows? Maybe it will. Maybe they'll see that U.S. labeled Ukrainian missile come flying in and they'll be like, wait a second, we do need to go fuck these guys up, you know? Russia doesn't have a huge young population. They use 50-year-olds. They're also using 50s tanks. They don't control the skies, and Ukraine doesn't have an air force, and their Black Sea fleet is done.
Currency, both of these wars at the same time. Now,
We're
what that's
mostly
going to
just
do to our
giving
dollar?
Ukraine equipment too, not just money.
Sure, sure. Yeah, no, mostly we're just bribing the military-industrial complex and sending old weapons over there. However, you know, there is, as you brought up the talk of agency before, it is true that individuals have agency. It's also true that there's such a thing as moral hazard. So if I were to just say, I'll start giving, hey, Ryan, I'm going to start giving you $1 million a month, and then you quit your job and you sit at home, and I go, look, he doesn't want to work. He doesn't want to work. He wants to stay home. He doesn't want to.
That's such a great point. We shouldn't give anything to anybody at all. The moral hazard is that they'll stop working and they'll just instantly just be taking free shit from everybody all the time, everywhere.
And then you quit your job and you sit at home, and I go, look, he doesn't want to work. He doesn't want to work. He wants to stay home. He doesn't want to. It's like, well, yeah, okay, there is some truth to that, but might that have, you know, the Ukrainians just want to fight. Okay, but might that have something to do with the blank check that they've received from the world?
You know what else would be an interesting moral hazard? It was this old policy called appeasement, which is where you give territory to an insane fucking dictator, and you don't actually have them experience any of the consequences of taking it, because if they just get a little bit, maybe they'll fuck off. Interesting, we don't talk about that moral hazard. What about the moral hazard of allowing somebody to conquer Ukraine for free with absolutely no repercussions whatsoever? Is that not a moral hazard? Also, yeah, the irony is not lost on me of, well, no, never mind, yeah.
So the whole point here, right, is that, and this is true with Israel and with Ukraine, what happens is that when the biggest bully in the history of the world, the U.S. empire, says, we got your back, people get a lot braver than they otherwise would. If Israel didn't have unconditional support from the United States of America, they'd be forced to make a deal with some of their neighbors. And same with Ukraine. You know, you say like, oh, if the war ended, Ukraine would just be ready to fight Russia again in a few years without our backing? Without us arming them, without all of Europe behind them? No, they wouldn't, because they know it's a fight they couldn't possibly win.
Dave, what's a risk?
No, because it wouldn't be Ukraine in the future war. It would be whatever other non-aligned country that Russia would set its eyes on next. They wouldn't need to go to war with Ukraine. They'd have the territory already divided and the country fucked, and the country under the thumb of the Russian leadership.
Your game to play. I mean, I think I know what your answer would be to this, but what's a riskier game to play? Is it you know, allowing Putin to expand unchecked, just to go back to the argument that Vaush made earlier, or is it, you know, escalating the war? It seems as though there are risks in both scenarios. And
yes, please, can you lean into that more, please?
Why is one riskier than the other at this point?
Well, look, I mean, okay, so the biggest risk.
Please don't let him dodge this. Please make him answer this fucking question.
One riskier than the other at this point.
Well, look, I mean, okay, so the biggest risk that, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, we should all be concerned about is the potential of nuclear war. And what's prevented the nuclear war in the past
has been appeasement.
Has been private negotiations, handshake agreements, and mutually assured destruction. The fact that, you know, nobody really wants to get into a nuclear exchange because we all lose.
Mad mutually assured destruction. So there was a counter on Soviet expansionist policy. There wasn't moral hazard there. They did have to pay a cost for it, and that would have been the utter annihilation of their country and maybe the world. Oh, interesting. So are you saying that some kind of deterrent effect was actually an important motivator for making people not act like imperialist, expansionist fucking lunatics? Huh.
The fact that, you know, nobody really wants to get into a nuclear exchange because we all lose. The only time, especially now, because the current administration isn't doing handshake deals or even having conversations behind the scenes with the Russians.
Yeah, nobody is. You see all of it is in public. Okay.
The only thing that could lead to a nuclear exchange, so in other words, the worst case scenario is that Vladimir Putin actually thinks he's going to die. He thinks he's going to end up like Muammar Gaddafi. And that's the scenario where you might end up launching nukes because, you know, screw it, bring everybody down with you. In terms of the risk of Russian expansion, I do think that Vaush made a somewhat fair point where, look, between the mix of, this is my point, not yours, but resulting in yours, between the mix of NATO joint military exercises with the Ukrainian government, the massive amounts of foreign aid, the weapons shipments that Ukraine has got, going back to before the invasion of 2022, but certainly since 2022, it has made Ukraine a tougher adversary than they otherwise would have been. Vladimir Putin famously said back in 2008 when he was warning Burns, who was the ambassador to Russia at the time, that I could be in Kiev in 2 weeks. Well, I don't think that's true anymore. I think it's a tougher battle for him than that. But then also, you think because he ends up getting the eastern part of Ukraine, that he's moving on Poland after that? I just think there's absolutely no reason to think that that's the situation. I don't.
Just because he peels away Transnistria or whatever from Moldova, you think he's going to invade fucking Georgia? Oh, just because he takes, what is it? I never remember the names of these things. South Ossetia and Abkhazia or whatever the fuck, the prisoner of Azkaban from Georgia. You think he's going to fucking go into Ukraine now? Oh, just because he takes the Donbass and Crimea from Ukraine, you think he's going to go into, how do we not see the Abkhazia? Yeah, sorry, fuck the names of these. How do we not see, the pattern, the dominoes falling? So what are we going to do when he invades? What's the next what would it be? Can I use second world? Second world countries. I don't think we use that term anymore. It's non-aligned states bordering Russia. I don't even know I don't know what the alignment status even is in the fucking I don't even know. The maps in Europe right now would be whatever the fuck the next country is. Why would we not assume that Russia might have some interest there, might want to go in and fuck with shit? Why would they not? I mean, nothing happens to them when they do it. Central Asia? Yeah, but realistically, we're not moving into, or when you say Central Asia, you mean Greater Middle East region? Well, Georgia's already fucked with. You mean Armenia and Azerbaijan? Or the Stans?
I don't think the bottom
Although
line is
he's
that
right next to Poland, it seems like, given the history of NATO and everything else, that's pretty dangerous too.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the whole argument.
Wait, what?
Given
that's the situation. I don't think the bottom
Although
line is
he's
that
right next to Poland, it seems like, given the history of NATO and everything else, that's pretty dangerous too.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the whole argument that all of the people who wanted to bring Ukraine into NATO made was that, well, he won't attack them if they're a NATO country. Now he's going to go after Poland. I just don't see it as being very likely. I don't think the guy's on a suicide mission. I think, as Burns told...
You're making the argument, Putin's not on a suicide mission? He'll never attack a NATO country? Man, sure does suck that Georgia in 2008 couldn't join NATO. Man, sure does suck that Ukraine in 2014 couldn't join NATO. You just made the perfect fucking argument for these countries to be in NATO because Putin's not suicidal. Congratulations, yes.
I just don't see it as being very likely. I don't think the guy's on a suicide mission. I think, as Burns told Condoleezza Rice, that it was never a suicide mission. It was a choice they didn't want to have to make. That's what our intelligence was saying at the time. And so, no, I don't think that there is to pretend. Look, I think American expansionism has been more of a threat to the American.
Oh, yeah. First world was the United States and the democracies of NATO. And the second world was the Soviet Union, Warsaw Pact, and then the third world was the non-aligned
Republic than anything else. The idea that Putin is somehow some type of existential threat to America, I think, is, aside from the nuclear question, just not true. I think that there has been an effort for many years now by the entire political class and the entire corporate media to demonize Vladimir Putin in oftentimes the most cartoonish, ridiculous ways. He stole the election in 2016. He's got bounties on U.S. soldiers.
Why do they laugh at this stupid shit? These fucking retards will say, well, America's trying to destroy the entire world. America's fucking imperialism. Russia trying to meddle with our elections? Oh, no, that would... No. I feel like these are guys that schedule after they fucking get off their high school classes. They're like, oh my God. So my mom and dad, what they do is every day they fill the toilets upstairs with piss and they don't flush it all. And we're going to go upstairs and we're just going to fucking play in all of it. We're going to smear piss all over ourselves. Or we're just going to giggle at each other over the dumbest fucking shit that we could possibly think of covered by fucking parents' piss. What are we talking about? Why is that so funny? The funny part is that it's inconceivable to them that God, kill me.
I think that there has been an effort for many years now by the entire political class and the entire corporate media to demonize Vladimir Putin in oftentimes the most cartoonish, ridiculous ways. He stole the election in 2016. He's got bounties on U.S. soldiers' heads in Afghanistan. Now, from our perspective here, right, people in, say, this alternative media space like Breaking Points is in, we all kind of laugh and mock this stuff.
Yeah, because the idea that Russia would have any opportunity to try to influence our media at all is ridiculous. I wonder how much these guys talk about the Jews in AIPAC, though. I wonder how obsessed they are. Well, to be fair, Dave is Jewish, so maybe he's not as obsessed with that. But he's also a pick-me and a fucking liber dipshitarian, so who the fuck knows? Maybe he does obsess over AIPAC.
ridiculous. Look at how the CIA is lying to everybody, and they actually fell for it. And look how it's been exposed.
Oh, never. Oh, okay, yeah. There you go. That's true, right? Russia would never do anything bad. The CIA, though, literally fucking Hitler. Hitler, not Hitler. CIA, literally Hitler. Okay.
From Vladimir Putin's perspective, all of the most powerful people in the most war-hungry, powerful country in the world have essentially been saying over and over again that he declared war on us. I mean, you guys, you tell me, because I know you guys have covered this stuff a lot.
How about, why don't we look at it from the people, you know what? You know you can judge a man by? You can judge a man by his friends, okay? That's why I will never fail to treat you like a BP dealer. I'm just kidding. Like, why don't we look at all the people around Russia? Like, why aren't any of these countries clamoring to get back? Why would they join NATO? Like, why were they all so hungry and thirsty for that throbbing American freedom dick? Why weren't they like, oh no, the Soviet Union collapsed? Like, okay, well, you know, we kind of like, we raffle mayoed our way out of you guys like in 91, but like, maybe we should come back. Like, let's rejoin NATO. Like, wouldn't that be, or not NATO, I'm sorry, let's rejoin the Warsaw Pact. Wouldn't that be based? Let's make a new Soviet Union. Wouldn't that be awesome? Kind of crazy that all of those countries were like, nah, I'm good on that. I tried that for, 60 whatever fucking years, 40, 50 years, whatever the fuck. I'm good on that actually. I think I'm gonna do the exact opposite actually. I think I'm gonna do the exact opposite thing of joining anything having to do with Russia. I'm gonna do what's absolutely not that at all. Do you think there might be a reason for that? Like,
how many people in the corporate media and in the intelligence apparatus said that the fake overthrowing of the elections in 2016 was worse than Pearl Harbor? They were saying out loud for years that he's declared war on us. Now, if you're Vladimir Putin, you can't just laugh at that. You have to take that seriously. It was William Perry, Bill Clinton's defense secretary, who said that Vladimir Putin believes that it is the U.S. That the U.S. policy.
Speaking of, worse than Pearl Harbor. Oh, fuck, this is going to play an ad. Don't do it.
Wellness is a key growth pillar for Mitsui. We think we can contribute to society because we already have presence in many areas that are vital to putting together a wellness ecosystem. With Mitsui's supply chain of agricultural products, raw food commodities, our food manufacturing capabilities, our nutritional expertise, and by combining our presence in the healthcare space, we think we could provide a very holistic solution to this very important theme that the world faces.
This is really the worst attack we've ever had. This is worse than Pearl Harbor. This is worse than the World Trade Center. There's never been an attack like this. And it should have never happened. Could have been stopped at the source. Could have been stopped in China. It should have been stopped right at the source. And it wasn't.
That's Trump talking about the coronavirus, by the way. Worse than Pearl Harbor.
Is to overthrow Vladimir Putin. Now, I don't know for sure whether he's right about that or wrong. It wouldn't surprise me if he was right. That does sound a lot like my government. But that's the perspective that he's got to come to this from. And I think all it takes is, as I believe it was John Mearsheimer who coined the term, strategic empathy. And that's all you kind of need in this scenario. It's not empathy for its own sake. It's strategic empathy. The same thing that you need to understand the Palestinians.
What is with the glazing of Putin by retards on the left and right? Does it just boil down to America bad? So when you are growing up, you don't ever see the things that your parents provide for you. When you grow up, you just see that they give you rules, and sometimes you don't like those rules, and it's kind of annoying, and fuck them. And eventually you turn 18, you get to go to college, and you're like, you know what? Fuck these dudes. Fuck my parents. You know who's actually cool? The dude that gives me free fucking crack at recess. That guy's cool. The guy I meet at my lunch period that gives me crack cocaine. That dude is fucking based. Not my lame loser fuck parents, okay? Fuck them. That's the mentality of all of these fucking losers, is they grow up in the United States. They have no fucking idea like why anything in this country works, what we're known for, what it's cool for, what it's unique at, all they know are all the bad things that the guy that sells crack cocaine at recess tells them about the United States. Putin tells me the truth about my country, that you guys lied about vaccines and you guys are actually the ones that invaded everybody. Russia would never do that. And if Russia did do that, well, They had to. It was probably America's fault. America made Russia do those things in Afghanistan and Chechnya and overthrow those people in the other governments of the Soviet Union and the tanks and, you know, crushing people. And like that was the United States. And the U.S. probably did Tiananmen Square too. They made China do that. Like it's not like listening to every other. It's why these same people will say things like, "Oh, I don't trust CNN. That's state-run media." Anyway, let me link you an RT source for why I believe this particular thing about XYZ. Like, oh, okay. Jerusalem Post? I don't read that trash. Anyway, did you say how many new Palestinians were murdered yesterday? Check out this Al Jazeera link. The
same thing you need to understand Al-Qaeda is that these, I'm not saying they're good groups. Some of them are, you know, some of the Palestinians are good people, but some of them are terrorist organizations. Al-Qaeda is a terrorist organization. Vladimir Putin is a despot, but they also can have legitimate grievances. And we ought to, if we want to ignore those, then okay, but we ignore those at our own peril.
I just want to say, if I may, like, respectfully, again.
How about let's make Russia ignore things at their peril? Shouldn't they be the ones in peril? Not us? Why? Isn't that what the point of all of our fucking military spending and all that shit is? Shouldn't they be the ones where it's like, man, if you want to ignore when the U.S. says don't fuck around, I mean, that's on you to find out, I guess, right? Why not let them find out? Why do we have to find out for people that are not on our level?
No talking about the present or what to do now. And this is my frustration with this
Vaush,
conversation.
I'm sorry. I promise I'll be very, very quick on this. But the other point that I just did want to make to you as you bring that up again, it's actually not the case that when I have all of these Israel-Palestine debates that I want to talk about what's going on right now and they want to talk about all of the history that led to this point. It's actually quite the opposite. Sagar made this point when he moderated a debate recently for me on Breaking Points when he was recapping it the next day. The truth is that all of the pro-Israel supporters want to just talk about October 7th to today. And
I'm still here, Dave. You cowardly, spineless fuck. We can only debate. The only way I would ever agree, though, to debate him on Israel-Palestine is he would have to take 2 minutes to explain what the NAP is first. He has to explain the NAP because I just can't bring myself to debate a libertarian that can't explain non-aggression to me, okay?
Everybody who's critical of Israel actually wants to go back through the history and talk about all of it because, yeah, it's important to understand the history to understand what position we're in now.
It is.
Vaush, let me give you. Let me bring you up to this week, since you want to talk about today. So this is from earlier this week from Zelensky's top advisor. You probably saw this quote. He's got a couple others out there publicly. He's saying this in English, so we don't even have to hit the translate button.
Nice of him.
Very nice of him. After the attack on the beach in Crimea, he said, quote, "There are not and cannot be any beaches, tourist zones," those are his quotes, "and other fictitious signs of, quote, peaceful life in Crimea. Crimea is definitely a foreign territory occupied by Russia where there are hostilities and a full-scale war, the very war that Russia unleashed for genocidal and invasive purposes only. Crimea is also a large military camp and warehouse with hundreds of direct military targets, which the Russians are cynically trying to hide and cover up with their own civilians, which in turn are considered to be civilian occupiers." So he said this after Ukraine killed civilians on the beach. So are we the baddies here?
I mean, it's all.
Watch Dylan Burns' video on this, and he has a camera from the angle Breaking Points does not offer. Is the claim here that Ukraine and all their infinite access to military materials is just like missile striking civilians now? Because Ukraine is just so weapons rich in air, in missile capabilities right now that they're just
almost a perfect mirror of rhetoric employed in the Hamas versus Israel conflict, actually, where, when Hamas killed civilians on October 7th, the argument was that the civilians were settlers who were occupying stolen land, and therefore you can't reasonably argue they're civilians. And then on the other hand, of course, you have Israelis who say that Hamas uses the Palestinian people as human shields. In the West Bank, you have the argument. It's remarkable, actually, how many parallels there are and how these are employed. Are we the baddies? Yes, we're all the baddies. Nation states the baddies. That sounds reductive, but that.
God. Vaush is so cucked out on the Israel-Palestine stuff, even though he has the brain, power for it. He's so cucked out to being an American hater in some ways that he can't bring himself to give the full-on fucking pro argument for the United States. He won't do it.
There are and how these are employed. Are we the baddies? Yes, we're all the baddies. Nation states the baddies. That sounds reductive, but that is just the way the game is played. You will never find a nation engaged in war.
There are ways to play the game without explicitly justifying the slaughter of civilians on it.
The slaughter of civilians. but not on October 7th. I don't think Hamas or, IJ, I don't think they were involved in that at all. Like the slaughter of millions of civilians, though. Like Israel, like who are the most like civilian murdering countries on the planet? Israel, Ukraine, USA. The most bloodthirsty, discriminating, targeting civilians.
Beach.
But in practice, if you go back to basically any military conflict where existential threat was on the line, which it certainly is for Ukraine or is in the Israel-Hamas conflict, you will see that this rhetoric and these standards are employed. This is not me arguing that it's justified. It's morally abhorrent because war demands abhorrence of the people who participate in it. You're not going to find any large-scale conflict where stuff like this doesn't happen, which is why, to me...
Stuff like this what? Are you just conceding that they must just be shooting missiles at civilians? Like...
The interesting question is...
It's not even a large-scale conflict in Crimea. Like, why is the American public supposed to care all of a sudden that Russia controls Crimea? Like 4 years ago, you would
have
been laughed at if you suggested that Ukraine ought to go to war to kick Russia out of Ukraine.
Well, that's a separate question. The first one about like the abhorrence of this rhetoric, which, by the way, I agree with. I just want to be clear that this is a...
Does he think that 4 years ago Ukrainians just like didn't give a fuck about Crimea anymore? Is that his assumption that 4 years ago Ukraine's like, Crimea is probably gone forever? Like,
consequence of like these heightened tensions, which is why I'm interested in what can be done to bring an end to this war, a permanent end, not some middling ceasefire that gets broken almost immediately. In terms of whether or not America should care, I don't know. The average American couldn't find Kabul on a map. You know, the average American doesn't care about anything outside of their own
Jesus Christ, I don't think I could find Kabul on a map. Hold on. Can I link link me a blind map? It's got to be western, central, western. I'm doubting myself. I'm doubting myself. I'm doubting myself. I'm trying to think of the military bases we left. I would say Central Western. Okay, fuck it. I would say Central Western Afghanistan. Oh, fuck, it's not. It's going to be like in the East. It's going to be way the fuck off. Fuck! It's not Central Eastern. I can't find Kabul on a map. I'm fucked. I am retarded. Damn, who the fuck would know where Kabul on a map is? Why not just say like Afghanistan, dog? God damn.
To this war, a permanent end, not some middling ceasefire that gets broken almost immediately. In terms of whether or not America should care, I don't know. The average American couldn't find Kabul on a map. You know, the average American doesn't care about anything outside of their own tax breaks. My interest in what the average American cares about is nil. The average American doesn't care about the homeless. Why should I care about what they care about? What I care about is what's good. Sometimes they do. I don't know. The average American with the state of our education, I care about what's good. Nuclear war is bad, by the way. That's where I land in that particular moral equivalence. I think that if we settle with an unjust, tense, quiet with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, we guarantee future conflict. If you look back at the history of expansionist empires, if you take a look at what Russia is doing now and compare it to the rhetoric employed by other nations that have annexed adjacent territory,
Nazi Germany,
you will find they tend not to quit while they're ahead. There's a pattern of overextension.
Let me ask you, so on this piece, you hoped that if there's enough fighting that eventually these two fighters will become exhausted and kind of peace will break out. But you've also said that if we get a peace deal, then war will eventually break out. So why would the peace from exhaustion not just lead to your fear that 2 years later war would break out again?
Because
I think that because not all pieces are the same, right? If both sides fight until they're exhausted and they come across like some mutually agreed upon armistice lines or eventual new territory lines, like there's a difference between that type of peace versus a peace where you're like, stop fighting right now and just like, deal with it. Like these are two different things, right?
Sounds like war is the only logical endpoint of your position here, either position.
I think it needs to be a peace deal that the Russian and Ukrainian people are happy with. Right now, we haven't even gotten close to finding that point, which means the only real end to the conflict would be the complete annexation of Ukraine and the annihilation of all the militias and insurgency groups within it, which would be
true. Don't ever forget that. These people like Ryan Grimm, These people would be against us joining World War II or fighting the Nazis. These people would be opposed to it. 100%. Don't ever let them convince you differently. They would be the biggest Nazi lovers in the fucking universe. Not Nazi lovers, but they would say it's not our conflict. We don't need to be involved in that. Like, look at how much death and destruction happened during World War I because the United States joined. Like, are we going to sit here and have Soviet troops being fed into the slaughter? Are we going to be into the maw? Are we going to sit here and watch all of these people, across world? Like, why can't we all just be like, France, lay down our arms, set out our new territories? Like, how many people died? How many more people died in countries that decided to fight? Like, it would be all the same dog shit fuck arguments would be used. Ugh.
Very difficult considering the fact that Russia has logistical breakdowns 50 miles out of their border, or Ukraine retaking all of its territory, which is at the moment basically unthinkable. It doesn't seem like there's any end to the conflict right now outside of something that could be imposed by a kind of international...
Took Japan attacking the United States again in World War II. I think God, I hate the Westerners. God, I hate them. I hate the West. I hate the West. I'm going to go live with a tribe in fucking Pakistan or with my Persian brothers in some fucking mountain in Iran and then get eaten, okay? One of the I'm not gonna find it. It was in one of these long, stupid fucking Twitter threads where where the one of the whitest people I've ever had the misfortune of tweeting at my entire life made this argument where he was like, maybe where is it? One day we'll get through World War II. Next, to refute my point, this is what he said, to refute my point that it's counter-evolutionary to believe a population of millions of people could be happily pursuing their own death. Destiny screams, have you ever heard of Nazi Germany or World War II Japan? What the fuck kind of white-splaining is this? Given the Nazis were famously white, my confusion continues, as well as over the idea that the civilian Germans and Japanese were pursuing death rather than military victory. Certainly Japanese kamikaze pilots were pursuing death, but just like the suicide bombers, this was explicitly with the goal, however misguided, of advancing the well-being of the domestic population. Bro, I'm pretty sure before the Soviets basically said fuck you to the emperor in Japan, I'm pretty sure literally 99% of the Japanese population was ready to die on the shores of that country resisting a U.S. invasion. What an unfathomably stupid fucking statement. Well, okay, maybe the kamikaze bombers, maybe they were suicidal, but the rest of Japan just wanted to work and live in peace. And not like, what the fuck? This was this crazy fucking dude. The guy that did the fake tear. Like, bro, kill me. These people, sorry.
Move to sort of like solidify the line where it is now. And I do think that would just
am I making this up, or were there some, was it in Japan or was it in Korea? Weren't there like soldiers that were trying to fight like World War II like 10 years later on like some random Southeast Asian islands where they were, am I making this up, or was this actually a thing that happened where they like burrowed in and like fucking fed off of like crabs and lobsters and like waited to kill people? Like, geez, in the Philippines? Yeah. Jesus Christ.
to more peace in the future? That's my question. And I don't come to this with a solution, by the way. If I had a solution, or if anyone did, I think you'd be hearing them preaching it a lot more often. I don't like the idea of treating this like team sports, or like, you know, well, in actuality, like we could have prevented this if we went back 20, 30, 40 years. I know there's a lot of other cool stuff we could have done. We could have invested in like Apple early too, you know?
Let's say the US tripled the NASA budget and sent it all to Ukraine. Do you think that would be too much US?
Why are we so fixated on this NASA budget point? What, like, man, we really want to fund Elon's opposition. I guess we really don't want him to have any success with SpaceX. Like, what do we
support?
I mean, if we over-support Ukraine, if we commit to it so hard that Ukraine starts pushing back further, my concern would be that the brass in Ukraine would get arrogant and start pushing into Russia. I don't think that's especially likely. Certainly, Ukraine doesn't have the same sort of legacy and cultural pretext of expansionist sentiment the way that like Putin does, but it's possible. I also disagree, by the way, with the strike they did on some of those early warning systems. You showed an article with that headline a little bit ago. I think that's dangerous territory. I don't think that Ukraine has been particularly irresponsible in this conflict as military conflicts go, and that's a pretty low bar. I do think that there's a risk the more we gin them up, the more gung-ho they get, and I think that risk increases the longer this goes on too. So again, we either let Ukraine get washed entirely. I don't even know if Russia could do that at this point, even if we divested from Ukraine. We sort of pressure Ukraine to accept the Russian peace deal as it is now, or we overinvest to the point where they can reclaim their borders, which given enough time and enough money, we unleash Area 51 on the Russians. Sure, maybe Ukraine could do it. Of these three options, which is the most likely to bring about the fewest deaths, the lowest likelihood of long-term nuclear conflict? In my opinion, the path will get clearer the more time goes on because we will increasingly test the willingness of the Russian people to support this ongoing engagement. That sounds horrible. I think this is a horrible situation. That's not me blaming anyone involved, the Pentagon, the Kremlin, whatever else. It's a horrible humanitarian nightmare, but it's also a pretty difficult one to manage. You look back at history and there are empires that were clashing with each other for centuries over and over again.
Are you going to sit there and judge the Japanese for wanting to die for the emperor, but think Americans wouldn't have died for the president given the same circumstances? So you're permabanned, okay? I want you to really think about that. I want you, when you type into my chat and it doesn't go through, I want you to really think about that, okay? When you're swallowing cupful after cupful of Drano later, I want you to think like, oh God, you banned me permanent. I want you to be thinking about that, okay? No. I don't. Why would I judge the Japanese for that? I think that's fucking based, okay? Japanese people were a very honorable people. We literally bombed the fucking shit out of that fucking country, okay? Fuck the nuclear weapons. We razed like almost it was like 23 major cities that we annihilated with bombs, and those people were still ready to fight and die for their fucking emperor, okay? They were ready to fucking, even after the first nuclear bomb, they were like, I didn't hear no bell. How many more you got? It was only when the Soviets, famous, I think, for murdering their last fucking monarchy, was like, okay, guys, we ain't with you on this one anymore. That the Japanese were like, okay, well, fuck, never mind. Oop. But halfway between never and mind, okay, the second nuclear bomb dropped. No, why would you think I'm judging the Japanese for that? The same way that where was that rifle behind a blade of grass? Where did this quote come from? Oh, it was the Japanese. We can never invade America. Japanese Admiral Yamamoto has been quoted as saying, Yamamoto, who attended college in America, explained his logic this way: there would be a rifle behind every blade of grass. I can't believe you think I would judge the Japanese for that negatively. I wasn't saying that. I'm an American, bro. Who the fuck where are you? I want Unbane just to ask what fucking dog shit ass Scandinavian shithole fuck country you're from, okay? Where as soon as you see an invading force, you check your fucking Google Maps to see when the next publicly assisted tram is gonna subway you out of your dog shit, bullshit ass fucking country, okay? Fuck you. The Japanese were based for wanting to fight. And you know who the most based Japanese are? It was that dude in 1970, okay, that was still crawling through the jungle, okay, waiting to find whatever the American racist version of Charlie is. What do you call, what's the slur for white American soldiers, okay? That guy was extra based, okay? Fuck you, all right?
Borders barely changing with each successive war. I don't want that to happen.
Look up Operation Ketsu Go. What was the operation where the Japanese were like loading up fucking balloons and sending them across the Pacific to napalm our shit? Oh shit, what was that called? Operation Japanese Balloons. That's not it. I don't even think didn't like 99% of these just crash like in the ocean? Japan launched some 9,000 balloons during a 5-month period to be carried by high altitude winds more than 6,000 miles eastward across the Pacific to North America. Perhaps 1,000 of these reached the continent, but there were only 285 reported incidents. Listen, wait, what was this? Did they really do this? Hell yeah, they did. Just listen. The Japanese didn't fuck around. They had their own Nazi unit. They had their own crazy fucking war unit. They had an awesome ass fucking emperor dude with crazy outfits. They have katanas.
Just because we've got nuclear powers involved, but because like it is a collective drain on the spiritual, financial, and military collective of humanity. I just don't want to come at it from a dogmatic position because I don't want to blind myself to avenues of peace that might be unintuitive.
And we're running up against our time limit here. But Dave, any kind of final thoughts you'd want to have on like how?
Yeah, their officers used to engage in like wholesome military competitions, like let's take the bayonets on our weapons and see how many women and children we can murder in one fucking go. Like, let's do it. Like,
ought to end. Like from your perspective to Vaush's question, what do we do now?
Sure. Okay. Well, first of all, I would just say that I don't think Ukraine has been very responsible throughout this whole thing, and certainly when their missiles hit Poland, and Zelensky immediately called for preemptive attacks on Russia by the West, either lying through his teeth and claiming it was Russia who attacked Poland, or being so clueless that he hadn't even done any investigation to figure out whether it was them or not. Either way, it seems pretty irresponsible to me. But look, without even going back into ancient...
So irresponsible. Like, Ukraine needs to be on its best behavior as they are facing the existential threat of a Russian invasion. Can't believe that Poland ever would make any mistakes or fuck up at all. Not acceptable.
History. Like, just going back to very recent history. It was Jens Stoltenberg. I apologize to the Norwegians. I know I'm butchering that.
That was offensive.
He gave the whole game away last year. But he admitted that Vladimir Putin actually sent them a draft treaty and said, if you just promise to not bring Ukraine into NATO, I won't invade. And he brags that they said, no, we won't.
Wait, where? What? Somebody link me. What is this treaty he's referring to? Please somebody link me. I don't know. Somebody link me. I can't even Google the fucking name that he said.
Don't sign that. Haha, you didn't want NATO expansion, and look at you now. You're getting more NATO expansion. It's like, yeah, and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians dead. Like, could we at least all agree that we should have just signed that treaty? Why is it a vital...
Can you explain why you feel that way about the Japanese, but not the Germans? Japan was out for conquest like Germany. They were genocidal like Germany. Or do you feel that they were based for fighting till they were defeated too? Listen, I always respect soldiers that fight for their fucking country and their shit. I mean, obviously I disagree with the Nazis, but for the German soldiers that fought, yeah, fuck it. They fought hard. They fought as well as they could have, yeah. What do you mean? The difference between, like, it's a different set of circumstances to give respect to, I guess. Like, respecting the Germans as they push aggressively, like, through tons of territories is one thing, but, like, respecting Japanese as their civilian population is on the brink of annihilation. Like, hold on, let me call Yamikiko. Oh shit, she's not picking up. I think the Americans like deleted another one of our cities from the globe. Like, let me call my other mom. Oh, that city's still there. Like, it's tenacious people. How much shit did Germany lose before they ended up surrendering? I don't know. Listen, I respect all people. Okay. Search for draft. It's historic that now Finland is a member of the alliance, and we have to remember the background. The background is that President Putin declared in the end of 2021 and actually sent a draft treaty that they wanted NATO to sign to promise no more NATO enlargement. That's what he sent us. It was a precondition for not invading Ukraine. Of course, we didn't sign that. The opposite happened. He wanted us to sign that promise, never to enlarge NATO. He wanted us to remove our military infrastructure and all allies. Why is he... Why would you cite this as a, like... thing? Why would he ever imagine that Putin could dictate to any of us like what other countries would do? This wasn't even about Ukraine. It was just about NATO expanding at all. How in what world is this fair? What? He wanted us to sign that promise never to enlarge NATO. He wanted us to remove our military infrastructure and all allies that have joined NATO since 1997, meaning half of NATO. All the Central and Eastern Europe, we should remove NATO from that part of our alliance, introducing some kind of B or second-class membership. We rejected that. Jesus. Okay, that's kind of an important part too, no?
Strategic that didn't want NATO expansion, and look at you now. You're getting more NATO expansion. It's like, yeah, and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians dead. Like, could we at least all agree that we should have just signed that treaty? Why is it a vital strategic interest?
Okay, I think I see what you mean. Would you say that Palestinians are based for willing to die so their deaths could be used to further their goals? Like, do you respect it but just think it's retarded? But you can be retarded and based at the same time. When I'm criticizing Hamas or I'm criticizing these people, I'm generally criticizing the cause for war and sometimes the conduct in war. But that doesn't mean that you wouldn't acknowledge like the individual bravery of the people present. We just don't usually talk about that. Yeah, I mean, fuck. Like, what's the one joke? Was it a Chappelle joke? Was it a George Carlin joke? Look at what a few people and some planes did. Fuck, what was the... Or was it, no. Was it a Bill Maher joke? How brave were 9/11 hijackers. It might have been a Bill Maher joke. I think it was. This is the one that he got fired from TV for.
On Politically Incorrect, the show that once followed this one, he made this infamous comment less than a week after 9/11.
We have been the cowards, lobbing cruise missiles from 2,000 miles away. That's cowardly.
That is a
Staying in
terribly-
the airplane
yes.
when it hits the building.
That is
Say
a
what you want
terribly-
about it, not
you know-
cowardly.
I mean, that's true. There are some cowardly acts, which maybe you argue like killing the civilians, but normally we just don't remark on like a person's like bravery. It's not that relevant in these conflicts. But what about Aaron Bushnell then? No, that dude was just straight fucking retarded. No bravery points for that. Now, if he would have like thrown him, like ignited himself and then jumped inside of an IDF tank, okay. Like Aaron Bushnell sets himself on fire because I don't know, dude's mentally ill. Okay, Palestinians will run up in their fucking Air Force Ones. Okay, they'll in their Ukrainian Eastern European joggers. Okay, they'll run up to IDF tanks and they'll plant bombs on the back and then fucking run away. Okay, these like 12-year-old kids will do this shit. That's pretty fucking brave, right? Also crazy and generally retarded, but.
Interest to the United States of America that we have a war guarantee with Ukraine. Like what? How many people in America? It's like George Kennan said back in the first round of NATO expansion.
I don't know what the jogger outfit shoes are. Somebody tell me.
Why is it a vital strategic interest to the United States of America that we have a war guarantee with Ukraine? Like what? How many people in America? It's like George Kennan said back in the first round of NATO expansion. We have neither the political will nor the resources to actually defend these countries. How many people in America actually would be willing to sacrifice themselves or their children to make sure that the Donbass region is ruled by Kiev? Would you guys be willing to sacrifice your kids
This
for
is
that?
ridiculous.
Anyone
man.
here?
The average American wouldn't sacrifice their lives to protect East Germany or Poland either. Do you think the average American would fight for Warsaw? This
Yeah, but
rhetoric
that doesn't
sounds,
make, that's
this
not
sounds
counter.
convincing, but it's empty
No,
rhetoric.
but, well,
Likewise,
no,
you're
Vaush,
still
Vaush,
not
let me
talking
explain.
about what you
Well,
want to say.
listen,
No,
Vaush.
explain.
Like, didn't the average? Isn't that exactly what happened though for World War II? Like, we got the average American to go and fight in fucking Vietnam. We got the average American to fight in Iraq. You don't think we get them to defend people in Ukraine or Europe? We could send people to fight the fucking Taliban and fucking Saddam Hussein, but you don't think we get people to fight fucking Putin? Do you know what the fuck our country is called? Do you know the history of any part of this fucking planet? What are you talking about?
Explain to me what you want today to minimize.
I'm going to finish my
because
point.
I keep talking about today, and then you keep talking about NATO. We know I addressed and acknowledged and agreed with the Western Americans that led to us.
Vaush, you're interrupting me and then claiming I'm not addressing something. So first, I was just saying, could we at least all agree that a couple years ago we should have just signed that deal and committed to not bringing Ukraine into NATO and avoided this war?
Couldn't Russia have just invaded anyway?
Huh?
Couldn't Russia have just invaded anyway?
That's such a good question. He's not going to answer. He won't answer. He won't answer. He won't answer. He goes, I can't answer that. No, I can't. And despite him saying like, oh, like we could have prevented all this. Now when Vaush's like, oh, well, couldn't Russia have literally just invaded regardless? He won't answer. He won't answer. He's not going to. He can say, oh, maybe, or counterfactual. I don't know. Blah, blah, blah. Maybe he will answer. Okay. I'll give him props if he does. He'll at least have a fucking spine to answer this one fucking question.
Sure. I guess in the worst case.
Oh my God. He's such a pussy ass bitch. God, he's such a pussy.
Scenario, it would be as bad as
maybe.
Vaush, that's not Vaush. That you're laughing, but there's no point to that. Yes, in the worst case scenario, we could have still ended.
Let's talk about what we can do.
Okay, let me please. Make my point. Okay, Vaush, let me just make my point instead of this constant interrupting. Listen, yes, in the worst case scenario, I suppose it could have gone as bad as it did in this scenario, but obviously the overwhelming odds are that it wouldn't have come to this. Now, in terms of your point of saying like, well, the average American isn't willing to go die for Germany or Poland. Okay, but so why are we adding more of these countries, especially when our own intelligence community is telling us that the risk of adding this other nation that Americans care about even less, the risk of it could result in this war, very explicitly, blatantly saying that. Now, look, again, I do think I actually answered this question pretty clearly, pretty early on in this. But right now, what we should do, being educated by what's happened in the very recent past, is to go, hey, America is going to announce that we will pull all of our support for Ukraine in this war under the condition that Vladimir Putin accepts some type of peace proposal. That's going to look like not quite as good as Ukraine would have gotten if they had taken the deal that Boris Johnson broke up.
Hold on. Even if that was the case, the only way the United States could even offer that deal is if we were already supporting Ukraine. So then, do you agree that supporting Ukraine then was a good idea so that now we can condition Russian peace on withdrawing our support from Ukraine?
but it's going to look like Vladimir Putin obviously keeping Crimea, obviously keeping some of the territories that he already has control of, and in exchange for him ending the war, we promise that Ukraine will not be admitted into NATO.
Okay,
so that deal is still possible. Listen, let me just add one final point to this, and then you can respond however you want. Understand something here. The United States of America holds all of the chips. We could offer Vladimir Putin something that would probably get him to do whatever we wanted him to do, and you know what that is, the ultimate crowning jewel for him. How about we leave NATO? If you end this war right now, America will withdraw from NATO. Why not? Listen,
this is like silly internet rhetoric.
Why not? I don't know. Never mind. Okay.
No, it's not. It's not.
Yeah, we're going to leave NATO. No, this is like for Twitter likes, you know. Like,
literally, the former president asked the question.
What if we left the key military alliance?
The way
Twitter likes, you know.
It's not.
I didn't. Hold on. I didn't understand him. I didn't understand what he said. He certainly didn't say. He didn't just justify. He didn't just respond to Vaush saying that would be a silly idea with the answer, well, of course it wasn't that silly. The former president suggested it. That's not. He didn't just say that, right?
Will withdraw from NATO. Why not? Listen,
this is like NATO. Silly internet rhetoric that would get you laughed out of any political conference. Yeah. We're going to leave NATO. No, this is like for Twitter likes, you know. Like
literally, the former president asked the question.
What if we left the key military alliance on the planet to incentivize a despot on the other side of the world to not invade the country they unjustly invaded?
Such nonsense.
What part of that was not? Vaush just described what was happening. You even used the term despot. Like, what do you mean? What? Like, you literally called him that. I think you were the first one to use it. What?
It's it's good for Twitter likes. It's great for like the ultra libertarians who are all like keenly interested in Yanukovych's like electoral legitimacy. It's not reality. You suggested that we offered a poll their support from Ukraine in exchange for a peace deal. Okay, fine. So let's finally talk about that then. What happens then if that divestment occurs? Naturally, there's a DMZ. Of course, there would be, right? And then you have a buildup of the remaining Ukrainian troops and Russia's troops on both sides. Don't you think it's likely that given a peace deal that takes place under those circumstances, eventually like the conflict would spark again? And this time, what are we going to do? Provide aid to Ukraine again when Russia invades again?
Is the alternate just rolling conflict, like the ongoing slog for another couple of years? I mean.
Yeah, they need to find the path through that allows the peace deal to take place in a way that doesn't guarantee an immediate future conflict. So, if we pursue an unjust peace that is immediately broken, it will have been for nothing, and we'll be in a worse position than we were before because nobody's going to want to stop the second version of the conflict 5 days after it starts. We need to be careful with this.
So first of all, let me just say that
and then Vaush will close with a response from you.
Okay, so I think that Vaush's response of like, oh, this is just what internet libertarians care about or something like that. I just think there was a lot of words without you actually saying anything there. NATO.
Wow, that's like everything you say ever.
Was created.
Not really. I mean, Dave does say shit. It's just incredibly fucking stupid.
World War II, because we had the Soviet Union controlling half of Europe, and the West and Western Europe had been destroyed. It was in utter ruins. And
we're doing the bipolar. No, he doesn't say bipolar. The multipolar Mearsheimer theory now, or whatever.
So we felt like we had to subsidize the defense of Western Europe to make sure that this very clearly expansionist power of the Soviet Union didn't expand into Western Europe. At this point today, Western Europe is rich, and we are $34 trillion in debt. It makes absolutely no sense. And by the way, the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. There is no reason for NATO to exist. There's no reason for the U.S. to be a part of it. The former president of the United
That's crazy. Why does Finland disagree with you? Why does Sweden disagree? Why are other people who, you know, I bet there are some countries who are feeling real good about being in NATO right about now. An expansionist power doesn't exist? What happened in Georgia? What happened in Moldova? What's happening right now in Ukraine? What are you talking about?
States of America, and the current frontrunner to be president of the United States of America again has made this point many, many times. This is not just something for internet libertarians to be interested in. This is something that should be a serious conversation amongst the American people. And by the way, during the fall, when the Soviet Union collapsed, there were many of the wisest graybeards in the American security establishment who felt the same way, who felt that, okay, the mission of NATO is over. Anyway, your next point, again, this is just an empty argument. You could say this about any peace deal. Well, what if war breaks out again? Well, okay, but if your worst case scenario is war breaks out, your solution is to continue supporting the war? We want to continue?
Yes. That's the whole point of deterrence. If war breaks out, what happens if somebody tries to do something? Then they get fucking obliterated. Yes, that's the whole point of deterrence. There should be, that's the whole, you brought up the term moral hazard earlier. This is the whole point. People shouldn't be allowed to operate with impunity like this. There should be severe consequences if you fuck around.
The war because we're afraid of war. Listen, if we actually, as I just mentioned, which is a serious proposal, we have the ultimate chip here. We have the chip that could allow Vladimir Putin to claim, hey, I won. I stood, which is what you want in these situations. You want to let everyone save face. You want to allow the Ukrainians to say, hey, we fought and we kept this part of our territory. You want to allow the Russians to say, hey, we were pushed into this, but we were victorious. You want to let everybody save face and come up with some type of deal. And yes, Vaush, you can make the point that it's never 1,000,000% guaranteed that it'll hold and another war won't break out, but it's a hell of a lot more likely than continuing the war. So the point is you want to come up with a deal that's realistic, that could maybe hold. And I do think that America has all the leverage in the world to make that happen.
And if I may, I'll just say that, like, no, the idea of holding out for a good peace, one that actually incentivizes both parties to keep their hands off, rather than just the first peace that comes up, that is a good instinct. The idea that there is no difference between a peace deal that immediately breaks down and, a war that continues until a good peace is found, there is a massive difference between these. Look at the multiple attempts at securing peace between the Ukrainians and the Russians over the 2014 invasion of the Donbass, right? Terms are set, conditions are then not met by either side, and then nothing changes, cementing a course of action that continued down 8 years until the proper invasion by Russia began. You need to find a good peace. I don't know where that path lies, which means that I don't have the convenient, simple answer of saying, what if we just divested, left NATO, and hope that Putin never invaded the remains of Ukraine again? I think that's a very easy thing to say. I think that it's good for, like, getting a populist fervor. I think it sounds compelling. I think it would do nothing. I think it's a virtue signal. After all, America is in NATO as a formality. Like many nations that are in NATO don't even meet the required 2.5% GDP military expenditure that they need to be there. NATO is just a cementing of existing alliances. Do you think we still wouldn't go to war with the interests of, say, Britain or Germany or France? Of course we would, because we're still allies. NATO is just the framework built around it. The real, true underlying force, which is shared geopolitical interest, persists nonetheless. What would keep Putin from invading again? In my mind, it would be promises from the West, but not promises of divestment. We shouldn't just leave Ukraine weak and open to being invaded again, because again, if they just break the peace and conquer the rest of Ukraine after giving it a year or two to rearm on the Russian front, what do we get then? Well, obviously, the Ukrainian people are conquered and they are subject to a great many, violences and humiliations. But in addition to that, of course, we continue to sort of throw fuel into the fire of an expansionist empire. Putin's intentions on this are not subtle. He was invoking the borders of the Russian Empire when he began the invasion of Ukraine. I do not think there's any reason to believe that he would be like sated after he made his way all the way over to Poland. What I want
Did
is
Vaush
real
just Kino?
when he began, we continue to sort of throw fuel into the fire of an expansionist empire. Putin's intentions on this are not subtle. He was invoking the borders of the Russian Empire when he began the invasion of Ukraine. I do not think there's any reason to believe that he would be like sated after he made his way all the way over to Poland. What I want is real reconciliation, not just between Ukraine and Russia, but the West and Russia. Russia has been, let's be real here, a nuclear missile-ridden backwater since the end of the Soviet Union. Prostitution skyrocketed. Child sex trafficking skyrocketed after the end of the Soviet Union. Their economy in shambles. Oligarchs effectively rule the country. There are many, many Russians who don't even have indoor plumbing. I think that a promise of shared investment, the thing we never did after the end of the Cold War, and not just business investment, not just Coca-Cola opening up a factory. I mean, real. You don't want the American taxpayer spending money on Ukrainian weapons? Okay, I got a better idea for you. 3 times as much money on Russian economic, reinvestment. Give it to them to work with. Build real economic bonds. One of the reasons Taiwan hasn't been invaded yet is because China and America are so integrated economically. We don't have that with Russia. That's one of the reasons they're able to persist in spite of all the sanctions on them, because they rely on a pretty primitive oil, coal, natural gas kind of extraction economy. I think that if we take Russia seriously as a foreign power and as a people, we invest in them and we care about them. In the long run, we could secure a better peace that both sides feel better about, and we could build a world where there is no longer any incentive for the West or for Russia to get angry at each other. And that's my hope. Naive it may be.
And probably cheaper if we just reached a peace deal and lifted the sanctions and then kept our hegemony.
There's
But anyway.
Well, this is a good place to leave it, and this has been super, super interesting. Thank you guys both for being game to talk some of this out. We really appreciate it. Vaush and Dave Smith, thanks so much for joining us on Counterpoints.
Thank you guys. Thank you, Dave. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Vaush.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Point.
Okay. I think I'll be back tomorrow. Normal time. Be careful. Love you. Bye. Ah, yes, America. League of the greatest tool of America global hegemony, only to the detriment of America and the advantage to our superpower enemies. True. Ribriano, Cappuccino, Pappuccino, Cappuccino, Mappuccino, Cappuccino, 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 Cappuccino,